Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If. This side. Today we will be seeing what if Deku awakened the phantom within. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Midoriya Izuku, often called Deku by his best friend Bakugo Katsuki, ran excitedly toward Katsuki, who was sitting on a park swing and waving at him. Deku shouted with enthusiasm, eager to share his news. Earlier, at the doctor's office, the receptionist announced that Inko and Izuku Midoriya could see Dr. Jacob in room. Inko took Izuku's hand, guiding him down the hall to a door marked with a large blue number. Upon entering, they were greeted by a tall man with brown hair, dressed in a white coat and dark blue glasses. He smiled as he sat down in front of a computer. Inko greeted him warmly, and Dr. Jacob began to explain the results of Izuku's X-ray and quirk strength test. He held up a large brown folder with Izuku's name on it, asking if they wanted to know the results. Izuku, filled with excitement, eagerly expressed his desire to become a hero like All Might. Dr. Jacob revealed that, according to the tests, Izuku would indeed be receiving a quirk. Inko embraced her son tightly, her joy evident as she asked about the nature of his quirk. Dr. Jacob explained that while he wasn't entirely sure what Izuku's quirk would be, it was likely to be a high B rank or even mid-A rank, possibly higher. Izuku couldn't contain his excitement, envisioning himself as a great hero. Dr. Jacob encouraged Inko to call him once Izuku received his quirk, advising her to bring him in for registration or to contact a hero if the quirk turned out to be dangerous. He handed her a card with his contact information, emphasizing the importance of keeping in touch. As they left the office, Inko expressed her gratitude, and Dr. Jacob wished Izuku well on his journey to becoming the #1 hero. Back at the park, Deku excitedly told Katsuki that he was going to get a strong quirk, and they could be heroes together. Katsuki, with his spiky blonde hair and a black shirt that read, "Cool guys don't look at explosions," jumped off the swing to high-five Deku. He asked what kind of quirk Izuku hoped to have, and Izuku replied that he wished it would be as cool as Katsuki's explosion quirk. Katsuki proposed they play heroes, with him taking on the role of All Might and Deku as the villain. Deku, in his soft voice, asked if he could be the hero after Katsuki. Katsuki agreed, striking a heroic pose and proclaiming his arrival. Deku, pretending to be the villain, declared his power with a mischievous laugh. Meanwhile, their mothers watched from a distance. Inko remarked on how cute the boys were, wishing they could stay young forever. Mitsuki, Katsuki's mother, acknowledged that every child must grow up eventually, reflecting on how quickly time had passed since they were learning to walk and talk. An hour later, Todoroki was heard screaming and pointing at a cockroach while standing on an ice tower he had created, much to Momo's blank stare. As the day drew to a close, Mitsuki decided it was time to take Katsuki home, reminding Inko to visit soon. Inko called out to Izuku, asking if he wanted to help cook dinner. Izuku eagerly agreed, his excitement bubbling over as Inko picked him up and they headed home together. A week and 3 days later, Dr. Jacob received a phone call during his lunch break. Recognizing the number, he answered, and a panicked voice on the other end introduced herself as Inko Midoriya. She was calling to inform him that Izuku had received his quirk. Dr. Jacob instructed her to calm down, ready to assist her with the next steps. Izuku had just received his quirk, but his mother was worried. She expressed uncertainty, stating that it didn't seem like her quirk or his father's. The suggestion was made that perhaps quirks could be inherited from ancestors, but she remained unsure. The doctor offered to check Izuku's quirk at 3 p.m., but the urgency in her voice escalated. She pleaded for the doctor to come to the hospital immediately, revealing that Izuku's quirk was causing him serious harm. Her sobs echoed through the phone, heightening the sense of urgency. The doctor, taken aback by the news that the energetic green-haired boy was in danger, quickly asked for the hospital's location. The mother provided the details, and the call ended. 40 minutes later, the doctor arrived at the hospital, rushing to the room. He pushed the door open forcefully, his concern mounting as he saw Izuku lying by the window, connected to life support. A nurse with red hair and green eyes informed him that he couldn't be there, but the doctor explained his purpose. He was a quirk specialist, there to help Izuku. He showed his credentials to the mother, who was anxiously holding her son's hand. The nurse relayed the information they had. Izuku had complained of chest pain before hyperventilating and collapsing in class. His pulse was weak upon arrival, and the rest of his medical records were at the end of the bed. After the nurse bowed and left, the doctor approached Izuku, examining his heart rate and breathing while reviewing his chart. The doctor spoke candidly, revealing that Izuku's heart was slowing down and his breathing was labored. He could still move, but at this rate, survival through the night seemed unlikely, and there was little he could do. Before leaving, the doctor assured Inko that he would remain in the building in case he was needed. He handed her a silver remote with a blue button, instructing her to press it if anything happened. She nodded, her focus unwavering from her son. The next day at 4 a.m., chaos erupted in the room. A nurse shouted for help as Izuku's heart stopped. His mother cried out, praying for her son. A man rushed in, performing chest compressions in a panic, urging Izuku to stay with them. Moments later, the nurse returned with the doctor and 2 other nurses, all ready to assist. The tension in the air was palpable as they worked to revive the young boy. One of the nurses asked loudly if the child was breathing. The man performing chest compressions replied that, although the child was breathing, his heart had stopped, leaving them puzzled about how this was possible. Dr. Jacob urgently called for a blood sample, insisting that he needed to try something. A nurse quickly responded, rushing off to gather the necessary tools. Jacob instructed that they needed to move the child to the cooling room to prolong the time they had to revive him and increase the chances of him waking up. In the cooling room, a nurse informed Jacob that they had only 13 minutes left before they would have to stop. Jacob, filled with urgency, expressed his concerns about whether this situation was related to the child's quirk or if his heart was failing. He quickened his pace down the hall, turning left and entering a room marked, "Test Results." As he searched for the child's file, he found it waiting for him on the counter. The details read, Izuku Midoriya, blood type O, age 4, male, quirk unknown, with a quirk level of A+, the 3rd strongest level possible. Just then, the phone rang, snapping Jacob from his thoughts. A nurse on the other end screamed that the child was breathing out green mist or smoke, leaving them unsure of what to do. Jacob dropped the phone and rushed back to the cooling room, nearly colliding with others in his haste to help Izuku. The doors burst open as Jacob entered the room, where he saw Izuku's face turning pale as he exhaled green mist that began to envelop him. The doctor performing chest compressions explained that as he worked, Izuku had started to breathe out the mist, and it felt as if his insides were transforming. Jacob concluded that this must be a manifestation of Izuku's quirk. As Jacob grabbed Izuku's wrist, it transformed into mist as well, causing a nurse to gasp in shock. Suddenly, Inko burst into the room, frantically calling for her son. 2 nurses attempted to guide her away to give the doctor space, but she was determined to reach Izuku. Jacob explained to her that one moment he was lying there breathing but without a pulse, and the next he was turning into green mist. Izuku's form was shifting, his clothes blending into a mix of light and dark greens, creating the mist around him. In Izuku's perspective, he could hear strange sounds, as if words were blended together, which became increasingly annoying. He attempted to open his eyes, only to be met with a blinding white light before his heavy eyelids closed again. He tried to feel around but only sensed a warm, comforting cloud. After a moment, the cloud began to fade, and he felt the cold ground beneath him, drawing him back into a deep sleep. From Inko's viewpoint, she watched as her son slowly began to return to normal. When he finally did, she saw him with a peaceful expression, breathing steadily. As the nurses and doctors checked his pulse and attached an 4-drip, her heart sank at the sight of a flat line on the monitor. Rushing to him, she enveloped him in a bear hug, tears streaming down her face. After a few frantic minutes, Dr. Jacob approached her with a clipboard and shared the good news that her son was alive, though not fully awake yet. He reassured her that Izuku would wake up and smile at her. Jacob explained that Izuku's quirk was somehow powerful enough to put him in this state, and they had no record of it in their data, suggesting it might be a new quirk. He then requested information about Izuku's family quirk history to aid in their understanding. Inko took a moment to collect herself before sharing the details of their family's quirks. She explained that her quirk was telekinesis, while her husband Hasashi had fire breathing. Izuku's father, Heitan, also had fire breathing, and his mother, Sasha, possessed strong regeneration. Heitan's father had gas breath, and his mother had a quirk that released electrical zaps. Sasha's parents had normal regeneration and healing fingers. Inko's father, Inta, had telekinesis, but they did not know much about his parents. Her mother, Koko, had camouflage hair, while her father's quirk was gecko. She also mentioned Hasashi's brother, Hitachi, who had healing smoke breath but had passed away in a car crash. Dr. Jacob thanked her for the information, assuring her it would be incredibly helpful. He then gently reminded her to loosen her grip on Izuku, who was struggling to breathe. Inko immediately released him, her heart racing as she grabbed his shoulders, asking if he was okay and if he felt strange. Izuku, now sitting up, expressed that he felt empty and asked what had happened. Inko, panicking, held his warm hands tightly, desperate for answers. Izuku felt an unusual sensation in his chest, accompanied by an overwhelming surge of energy. He looked at the doctors as Dr. Jacob stepped forward to explain the situation. Izuku's heart could no longer bear the strain, and he lost consciousness. Dr. Jacob detailed the circumstances surrounding Izuku's condition, explaining that he was technically dead due to his heart stopping, yet his brain was still functioning. This meant he was considered alive, but the news caused his mother to faint, and she was placed in a bed beside him. Dr. Jacob informed Izuku that he would be kept in the hospital for a week for tests to ensure his well-being and to learn more about his quirk. He advised Izuku to rest and eat properly, mentioning that a nurse would bring him food. As the doctors and nurses left the room, Izuku felt a surge of joy at the thought of having a quirk, envisioning himself as the #1 hero, someone who could bring safety and comfort to others with just a smile. The rest of the day passed without incident, but Izuku found it difficult to sleep due to his excess energy. He felt fine, moving about freely, though the absence of a heartbeat was a constant reminder of his unique situation. As the week began, Izuku sat in his hospital bed, conversing with his mother, who had arrived about an hour earlier. They speculated about his quirk and what the tests might reveal when Dr. Jacob entered the room. Dr. Jacob greeted them and explained that he would conduct the quirk test that day. He handed some documents to Izuku's mother for her to sign, and then he led Izuku out of the room and down to the ground floor, where they headed to a separate building. Upon entering a large room, Izuku noticed various dummies for quirk testing, a running track for speed assessments, a shooting range for long-range quirks, and several other facilities, including a pool and strength testing equipment. Once inside a designated testing area, Dr. Jacob encouraged Izuku to attempt transforming into the mist or smoke he had previously exhibited. He assured Izuku that it was perfectly fine if he couldn't do it right away, as they had an entire week to explore his abilities. Izuku was uncertain about how to proceed, so Dr. Jacob suggested that he focus on the transformation, as many individuals reported that thinking about it helped them shift into their quirk. With determination, Izuku prepared to try, standing in the marked spot as Dr. Jacob began recording the session. As Izuku concentrated on transforming, he envisioned his body becoming. Dr. Jacob observed closely, noting the changes occurring in Izuku's hair and shirt. It was remarkable, he was beginning to transform on his first attempt. When Izuku opened his eyes, he saw that his hair, hands, and part of his shirt had turned to smoke. Encouraged by Dr. Jacob's thumbs up, he focused intently, and soon his hand began to grow larger and separate from his arm. The smoke shifted and flowed, changing in size and shape as it moved. After a moment, the smoke rejoined Izuku's arm, and he returned to his normal state, prompting Dr. Jacob to stop the recording. Dr. Jacob praised Izuku for his impressive first attempt, noting that most individuals took days to achieve such a transformation. Izuku beamed with excitement, eager to try again and see if he could transform further. However, Dr. Jacob explained that he needed to conduct a safety test first to ensure Izuku was healthy and unharmed. Izuku nodded in agreement, ready to continue his journey of discovery. At the end of the week, Midoriya's transformation had not caused him any pain. It revealed more about his quirk and himself. They discovered that the only reason he was still walking and talking, instead of crossing into the other realm, was that his quirk possessed a stronger regenerative ability than his ancestors. After a full day of tests and training, Midoriya could convert about 43% of his body into plasma. They realized that he was made of plasma, which also explained why he no longer needed to sleep, although he could if he wanted to. When he was in his plasma form, he could move, grow, and shrink the plasma with his mind, a trait inherited from his mother's telekinesis quirk. Being dead meant he was free from the limitations of a physical body, allowing him to utilize all his strength, be incredibly flexible, and move with remarkable speed. Strangely, even though he was dead, his body continued to grow, albeit at a slower rate than a normal person. By the time he turned 15, he would appear to be 13, but his muscle mass was developing at a rate that could rival a typical human's growth. It was astonishing how much he had changed thanks to his quirk, which he named Phantom Life. By the end of the week, there was still much to learn about Izuku's quirk. The observer felt that even a year wouldn't be enough to uncover even a fraction of its secrets. All they could do was wish him well and support him as he came in for checkups, hoping he would grow to be the best hero he could be, just as he aspired to. For now, it was time to say goodbye to the cheerful ball of plasma. As Izuku prepared to leave, he expressed his hope of meeting again and shared his ambition to become the #1 hero, just like All Might. He high-fived the observer and ran to his mother. The observer promised to be the first to congratulate him when he achieved his goal and reminded his mother that Izuku would need to return for a checkup in 6 months. They believed that if he could warm their hearts, he could warm anyone's. With that, Izuku and his mother bowed, thanked the observer, and left. Izuku returned home from the hospital the previous day, and with his mother having 2 days off work, they planned to enjoy 3 days of fun before he returned to school. After a week at the hospital, he felt excited. The first thing he did was watch the shows his mother had recorded for him, including 6 episodes of the world's most powerful quirks, 1 documentary on the origins of quirks, and 1 about Edge Shot's rise to the top 10. He decided to watch 4 episodes that day, saving the rest for the following days. Izuku wanted to train with his quirk, aiming to use 50% of its power when he returned to school. He planned to help make dinner and prepare a speech to tell Kaken about his situation, wondering how to explain that he was dead yet still walking and talking. He also intended to go for a run, as Dr. Jacob suggested it might help with his plasma abilities. Before leaving, his mother gave him some money for ice cream. As he ran past the park where he and Kaken used to play, he noticed it was empty since most kids his age were at school. He continued on to the ice cream shop, which was a 5-minute run away. After 3 minutes, he spotted the shop in the distance but also saw police officers blocking the area due to a villain attack. The villain, who called himself Stress, was tall and had yellow eyes with dark circles beneath them. He wore a black tank top and dark blue jeans. His quirk, Pressure, could make people feel overwhelming stress, leading them to break down. As Izuku approached the scene, he realized he had left his book at home, feeling frustrated that he had to do so on such an important day. Just then, a new hero made her entrance. Known as the Mindcracker, had the ability to change people's thoughts, from minor decisions to significant ideas, and she could read minds. She wore a white glittery scarf, a light blue jacket, a black shirt, dark gray pants, and purple high-heeled shoes. Struck a pose and introduced herself, ready to confront the villain. After about 15 minutes, the fight concluded with being interviewed while the villain lay on the ground, overwhelmed by his emotions. Once the situation was resolved, Izuku finally made it to the shop, where he treated himself to an All Might-themed ice cream. He then ran home, feeling an incredible surge of energy, as if he could run indefinitely. The rest of the day was uneventful. His mother helped him train, and he assisted with dinner. While cooking, he accidentally burned his hand, but to his amazement, it healed within seconds as if nothing had happened. The next day, Inko woke up to find breakfast ready and Izuku bustling around, cleaning the kitchen. She asked him what he was doing, curious about his energetic morning routine. Izuku couldn't sleep, so he made breakfast and began cleaning the house. He led his friend to the dining table, showcasing the food he prepared. He had made scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon, encouraging his friend to eat before it got cold, a proud smile on his face. His friend expressed concern about Izuku cooking alone, wondering if he was okay. Izuku explained that there was nothing on the news, leaving him with nothing to do. Now that his friend was awake, they could watch edge shots rise together. His friend agreed, suggesting they finish their meal first and then continue cleaning. Somehow, Izuku had managed to fall asleep the previous night, but he had memorized what he wanted to say to Kaken before. Drifting off. On the third day, Izuku had been training all day to increase his power from 48% to 50% control and achieve 100% transformation after breakfast, which his mother was preparing. By the end of the day, he had improved by practicing his transformation repeatedly. Although he still needed to think carefully before transforming, he was confident it would become easier over time. He discovered that if the plasma touched something, it could move, burn, melt, or electrocute it. He learned this the hard way when he accidentally melted a cup of water while trying to hit it with plasma, resulting in a minor zap when he went to clean it up. Despite the challenges, he was now able to use 100% of his transformation, though he was still learning to control it. Achieving 51% control was impressive, especially since he had only had the power for a little over a week. He was excited to return to school the next day and show Kaken his quirk, dreaming of becoming heroes who made people feel safe. The next morning, Izuku's mother called him to get up for school. He floated his all-might toy around the room, putting it back in its place before rushing down to the dining room, where his mother had prepared a bowl of cereal for him. He thanked her for breakfast and mentioned that he hadn't actually slept, asking if he could invite Kaken over for a sleepover. His mother, unable to resist his puppy dog face, agreed, provided that Mitsuki approved and that he got some sleep. After breakfast, he eagerly prepared to see Kaken. At school, Izuku walked to class, excited to tell Kaken about his quirk. Kaken had been wondering where Izuku had been, as he never missed school unless something significant happened. When Izuku entered the classroom, he handed a note to the teacher and then greeted Kaken, who expressed concern about his absence. Izuku reassured him that they would become heroes together, bringing safety to others. When the bell rang, the teacher asked if anyone had received their quirk over the weekend, calling Izuku to stand and share about his. As he walked to the front, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He explained that his quirk was called Phantom Life, an A+ level quirk that allowed him to turn into plasma or create it. He described how he could float, burn, melt, and even electrocute things, and that he no longer needed to sleep. Kaken was impressed, excitedly declaring that they would be heroes in no time. After school, Izuku and Kaken went to the park to wait for their mothers and test out their quirks. Kaken encouraged Izuku to transform into his phantom form, eager to see how cool he looked. Izuku explained that he was still slow at transforming but suggested they have a race using their quirks. They returned to their usual starting line, reminiscing about their races before they had quirks. This time, they would race with their abilities, Kaken with explosions and Izuku with phantom life. Kaken teased Izuku, not wanting him to feel bad when he won. Izuku confidently assured him that he was ready, and they began the countdown to their race. On the count of 3, the race began. In an instant, the protagonist launched into the air, soaring past the swings and landing near the monkey bars. Climbing up, they swung across, and at the end, they jumped down and sprinted toward the slide. From the top, they spotted Deku already on the final stretch of the run around the park. The protagonist thought about how Deku was so far ahead, realizing they still had to climb the net and use the flying fox before completing the lap around the park. They wondered how they had missed Deku passing by. With determination, they slid down and raced toward the net, quickly climbing up and down the other side. As they approached the flying fox, Deku shouted triumphantly that he was done. The protagonist stopped and rushed over to him, curiosity evident in their voice as they asked how he had been so fast. Deku explained that he could turn the plasma gas into lightning and light, allowing him to fly for most of the race, only running during the parts meant for it. Despite losing, the protagonist struck a confident pose, declaring that they would still be number one. Izuku laughed and reminded them that they would have to get past him first. He then invited the protagonist over for a sleepover on Saturday, where they could have a friendly fight to see who was better at combat, eat pizza, and watch a movie. He mentioned that he might not sleep much due to his unique abilities. Just then, the protagonist's mother arrived, and they asked for permission to attend the sleepover. She agreed, provided that Inko was okay with it, and mentioned that they would drop Deku off at his place since Inko was out getting medication. Excited for Saturday, the protagonist couldn't wait to show Deku that they would become the #1 hero while he would be #2. Izuku spent the night preparing for Kaken's arrival, setting up a bed and marking out a fight area outdoors. With an hour to go, he felt bored and called out in frustration. His mother suggested watching the news about a new hero named M, who had stopped a bank robbery and saved 3 hostages. However, Izuku needed a new book to add M's information to, as he had finished the last one the previous week. He opened the window to let in a refreshing breeze. His mother promised to get him a new book on Sunday but suggested he practice making plasma while still in his human form to gain an advantage in battle. While she cooked Kaken's favorite dish, ghost pepper curry, Izuku sat in the lounge, creating small strings of plasma from his fingertips. It was challenging, but he had managed to learn how to control it after a lot of practice. Suddenly, Kaken's voice broke his concentration, making him jump. He quickly absorbed the plasma before asking when Kaken had arrived. Kaken replied that he had been yelling for about 6 minutes. Apologizing for being distracted, Izuku suggested various activities they could do together. Kaken proposed playing video games first and then training. They played a video game called From Zero to Hero for a couple of hours, with Kaken winning as usual. However, Izuku was okay with that since they still had the main fight to look forward to after dinner. Now, they were in the backyard, preparing to train. Izuku asked Kaken how he trained his quirk. Kaken explained that he was working on increasing the size of his explosions, which were currently limited to the size of a basketball. He was jogging around the yard to improve his body and planned to expand his sweat glands with hot water to achieve bigger explosions. Izuku shared that he was focusing on making plasma without transforming or on transforming faster. To make their training more exciting, he suggested a game where he would use the plasma he created to hit Kaken, who would have to dodge and get closer until he could strike back. Kaken, energized by the challenge, took off running, ready for the fun to begin. "Sure thing, Death. Let's see who wins," Katsuki declared, preparing for their match. As he spoke, Izuku focused intently, channeling energy throughout his body and launching small plasma blasts at Katsuki. In the end, Katsuki emerged victorious, tagging Izuku before they headed inside for dinner. Katsuki enjoyed his curry while Izuku and Inko shared sushi. Inko, taking another bite, asked Katsuki how he had acquired his quirk. He recounted a day at the park, racing and playing with Izuku when a storm approached. A tree branch fell toward another child, and in a split-second decision he pushed the child out of the way, inadvertently causing an explosion. Though the child was shaken and had a minor burn, Katsuki felt exhilarated, believing he could become the next #1 hero, even better than All Might. They continued playing until the rain began, and the injured child went home early. Now, 2 months later, Katsuki had gained control over his quirk, except for when he sneezed. With Izuku now having a quirk, they were set to face off after dinner to determine who was the best in a fight. Inko wished them luck, cautioning them not to hurt each other too badly, as she didn't want to return to the hospital anytime soon. Katsuki, with a fist raised in determination, assured her he would win before anything could go wrong. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow, the stage was set for their duel. Katsuki stood on one side of the yard, while Izuku positioned himself on the opposite end, ready to fight for the title of #1. Inko stood on the sidelines, prepared to call the start. Katsuki shouted a challenge, while Izuku responded with determination. Inko counted down, and as she said, "Fight," Izuku began to transform. Katsuki charged at him with a powerful right hook, but Izuku sidestepped and executed an axe kick to Katsuki's back, teasing him about his predictable moves. However, Katsuki quickly retaliated, sweeping Izuku off his feet. Katsuki smirked, preparing to kick Izuku as he got back up, but at the last moment, Izuku transformed into a swirling cloud of dark and light greens, with misty eyes and mouth. He declared his intent to show Katsuki what he could do in this form and began launching bits of himself at Katsuki. Katsuki charged forward, ready to throw another punch, but Izuku's plasma blasts forced him to dodge, causing him to stumble. He taunted Izuku, asserting that he could still reach him. As he closed the distance, he kicked Izuku's legs, knocking him down. Izuku, now in plasma form, retaliated with faster and more precise blasts. Katsuki felt the impact of one of the plasma shots hit him, sending him crashing to the ground and knocking the breath from his lungs. As he struggled to rise, he noticed Izuku hovering nearby, and in a moment of instinct, he unleashed a powerful explosion, disrupting Izuku's plasma form and forcing parts of him to revert to normal. Izuku acknowledged Katsuki's skill, admitting he was barely holding on and needed to maintain focus to stay in his plasma form. As Katsuki closed in with explosive punches, Izuku realized he needed to act quickly. He called out, "Phantom Time," and transformed into a half-plasma, half-normal state, gaining speed while sacrificing some of his energy. Dodging a blast, Katsuki pursued him, using his explosions to boost his speed. Izuku countered with a swift strike to Katsuki's gut, but Katsuki retaliated with an explosion that knocked the wind out of him. As they both struggled to regain their footing, Katsuki managed to push Izuku back down, locking him in a headlock and applying pressure, unaware that Izuku didn't need to breathe. Inko watched anxiously as Katsuki attempted to subdue Izuku, not realizing that his opponent was far from defeated. That's when someone walked out to stop the fight. They called out to Bakugo, saying that Izuku had lost and was knocked out. As they pulled Izuku away from Bakugo's grasp, they checked him over, relieved to find no injuries. With a sigh, they declared Bakugo Katsuki the winner of the fight and asked him to help bring Izuku inside to tend to both of their injuries, pointing out the electrical burn on Bakugo's belly. Bakugo simply smiled and assisted in bringing Izuku in. Izuku felt a throbbing pain in his head as he opened his eyes, only to see Katsuki smirking at him. He groaned, realizing he had lost. Katsuki teased him, claiming victory. Frustrated, Izuku closed his eyes, covered his face with his hands, and shouted that Bakugo only won because he had his quirk for 3 months while Izuku had only had his for 2 weeks. As he sat up, he faced Katsuki, who ruffled his hair and told him to wait for their next fight. For now, their mom was getting them ice cream from the freezer as a treat. She reminded them that they needed to shower, get dressed, and brush their teeth before bed. Katsuki got up and walked over to his bag to grab his clothes. Izuku reluctantly followed him to his room. After they finished their showers and got dressed, they headed to the kitchen, where they found 2 bowls of salted caramel ice cream waiting for them, and their mom was on the phone with Katsuki's mom. Izuku suggested they eat their ice cream and brush their teeth before bed. Katsuki protested, insisting that they both had the same bedtime. They sat at the dinner table, grabbed their spoons, and dug into the sweet, cold treat. Katsuki savored the flavor, his pout transforming into a subtle smile. Izuku, with a playful tone, mentioned that he didn't need to sleep. Katsuki, surprised, demanded to know why. Izuku explained that he was technically dead, made of plasma, which was a mix of energy, heat, and matter. He added that while he could sleep, it was difficult due to his energy levels, and since Katsuki had knocked him out once already, he felt like he could run for days. He finished his ice cream and walked over to the sink to put his bowl away. Katsuki questioned what he couldn't do, given his abilities. Izuku climbed into bed while Katsuki settled onto the extra mattress. When Katsuki asked what he would do all night, Izuku replied that he would think of ways to beat him until he fell asleep. Once Katsuki was asleep, he planned to do some research on plasma and learn more about his quirk. Katsuki reminded him not to wake him up, even if he was the #1 hero who needed sleep. Today was the first day of junior high for both Izuku and Katsuki, and they were both 10 years old. Izuku felt excited, but Katsuki was less enthusiastic, questioning why future heroes had to attend a school like this. Izuku tried to cheer him up by pointing out that in 3 years, they could apply to UA, assuming they got in. Katsuki confidently asserted that they would, having trained hard for the past 6 years. He playfully punched Izuku's shoulder, reminding him that he was still second in their ongoing competition. Izuku pointed out that he was only 3 points behind and had been first for the past month. As they entered the school gates, Katsuki insisted that his points still stood. Izuku sighed and asked him to stop with the points and help him find their classroom. Katsuki agreed and led the way, dragging Izuku down the hall and into a room. Izuku marveled at Katsuki's ability to find his way anywhere and joked that he needed to learn his secret. They settled into their seats, with Izuku sitting behind Katsuki. Katsuki remarked that no matter how many times he tried to teach Izuku directions, he would still fail. Izuku took out his books from the bright yellow bag his mom had given him for his birthday. As the class settled down, the teacher announced that it was their first day and to help everyone adjust, they would have an easy day with little to no work. However, before that, the teacher wanted to know everyone's quirks and names. They were about to have a quirk show out on the field. At that moment, Kaken and Izuku exchanged glances, both understanding what the other was thinking. They wanted a quirk show, and they were going to deliver one. Everyone cheered at the prospect of using their quirks and quickly got ready to head outside. As Kaken and Izuku walked side by side, they brainstormed ideas for their performances. Once outside, their teacher gathered everyone in a circle and explained the rules. When a name was called, each student would step forward, introduce themselves, share a hobby or two, and then showcase their quirk. They all nodded in agreement, and the teacher began calling names. Kaken, as usual, entertained himself by giving amusing nicknames to his classmates, such as Pinocchio, Airhead, Flashlight, Fish Face, and Flaming Potato, which were among the more benign ones. Eventually, it was Kaken's turn, and he made quite the entrance, causing a loud explosion. If Izuku hadn't transformed into plasma to contain the blast, the class would have been in serious trouble. After Kaken left the circle, he received detention, while Izuku was thanked by many classmates for saving them. Soon, it was Izuku's turn to perform. He stepped into the circle and apologized for Kaken's earlier antics, introducing himself as Izuku Midoriya. He mentioned his love for training his quirk, Phantom Life, with Kaken and explained that he could turn into plasma. He added a spooky twist to his performance, encouraging everyone to stay close to their friends. As Izuku moved backward, a thick green fog enveloped the field, crackling with green lightning. Footsteps echoed from within the mist, and the wind began to swirl, forming a tornado-like shape. Laughter could be heard from inside the fog. Most of the students were either frightened or bracing themselves for whatever might emerge, but Kaken watched with amusement. Suddenly, the fog thickened and crept closer to the group, but only Kaken noticed. Izuku then shouted, "Boo!" in his phantom form, startling everyone except Kaken, who burst into laughter along with Izuku, both collapsing to the ground as they enjoyed the shocked expressions on their classmates' faces. After a moment, Izuku cleared the mist and apologized, reminding everyone that the teacher had requested a show. He also mentioned that he would be joining Kaken in detention. By the end of the show, both Katsuki and Izuku found themselves facing detention, but they were recognized as the strongest of the first years, which was a small consolation. As they walked home, Izuku expressed concern about not making any friends after their performance. Kaken scoffed, asking when Izuku had started to worry about that. Was it after he gave the class a heart attack, or just then? Izuku rolled his eyes and replied that maybe it was after Kaken nearly caused chaos. Kaken pointed out that he knew Izuku would save everyone, so he didn't understand why Izuku was upset. Izuku shrugged and mentioned that they were probably in trouble with their mothers. Suddenly, Izuku stopped walking, declaring that he would take a different route home. He started to run away but collided with someone, falling backward and hearing growls from the person he had bumped into. He quickly recognized his mother, who greeted him cheerfully. Izuku responded politely, but his mother warned him that she wouldn't let him off the hook for what happened at school. Izuku smiled sheepishly, promising not to repeat his actions, and excused himself to head home, saying goodbye to Kaken and his aunt. In the blink of an eye, after Izuku disappeared from sight, Kaken's mother turned to him, her demeanor shifting dramatically. She declared that he was in for a lifetime of trouble. The only thing Kaken could manage to say before being dragged away by the ear was a hopeful wish for a powerful quirk in his next life. Izuku ran down the street, reflecting on the past as he made his way to school. On his route, he encountered a villain attack. The first incident occurred in Qingxing City, where an extraordinary child was born, radiating light. Amidst the chaos, Izuku could hear his father's terrified screams in the background. Reports of people with superpowers began to surface across the globe, and no one knew the cause of these quirks. Before long, the supernatural became the norm, transforming society into one where about 80% of the population possessed some uncanny ability. The streets resembled scenes from comic books, swirling with chaos and confusion, ushering in an age dominated by heroes. As a giant villain struck a power pole, one of the heroes rushed in to catch it before it could hit the ground. The civilians expressed their excitement as they watched the scene unfold. They admired the punching hero, death arms, and one person wished for a quirk that would grant them super strength. The crowd cheered as a stream of water flowed in front of them, creating a barrier. A hero, controlling the water, urged everyone to stay back, warning that the area was too dangerous. The civilians felt reassured by the presence of the rescue specialist, Backdraft, who was there to ensure their safety. One onlooker commented on the desperation of the villain, noting that it was unusual for someone to resort to such extreme measures in the city. Another person explained that a petty thief had stolen a bag and found himself cornered. They were puzzled by how someone with a quirk could stoop to such low behavior. A man on his phone lamented about being delayed due to the chaos, unsure when he would make it to the office. As Kamui Woods dashed down the street, a group of enthusiastic fans cheered for him. He leaped onto a wall, positioning himself above the villain. The villain shouted a warning, threatening to break Kamui if he got too close. Eager to witness the action, I pushed my way to the front of the crowd. I was excited to see how the fight would unfold. Kamui Woods skillfully used his quirk to swing onto the railway. I remarked on his rising fame, noting that despite being new, he was making a significant impact. A man beside me teased me about my admiration for Kamui, and I sheepishly acknowledged it, looking away. Kamui dashed across the rails as the monster slammed its hand down, attempting to crush him. He skillfully dodged and ran up the creature's arm. Using his arbor quirk, Kamui grasped the villain's other hand, swung around it, and landed gracefully on a nearby building. He declared that the villain was guilty of assault, robbery, and the illegal use of powers during rush hour traffic, embodying pure evil. As Kamui prepared to unleash his special move, a bystander pointed at him, expressing excitement about what was to come. Another person encouraged Kamui to show something impressive. With determination, Kamui shouted his move's name, Lacquered Chains Prison. The crowd echoed his call in anticipation. The villain attempted to block the attack, but suddenly a giant woman intervened, shouting, Canyon Cannon. She delivered a powerful kick to the villain's face, stunning both heroes and civilians alike. The impact knocked the villain unconscious, interrupting Kamui's special move. As the giantess and the villain landed on the ground, photographers quickly gathered, snapping pictures and exclaiming in delight. The hero struck a pose, introducing herself as Mount Lady, assuring everyone that they no longer needed to worry about the villain. She playfully emphasized her presence, prompting the photographers to continue their enthusiastic captures. Kamui watched, feeling a twinge of frustration as he noted that Mount Lady was receiving all the credit for the victory. With the rise of superpowers, criminal activity had surged, leaving governments struggling to reform laws and maintain order. With quirks in mind, courageous individuals began performing heroic acts to keep the city safe, protecting its citizens from villains who abused their powers for evil. With overwhelming public support, heroes found an official role as peacekeepers overseen by the government. Those who excelled in their duties received the highest rewards, gaining fame and glory, while their careers depended on their ability to remain in the spotlight. As one hero caught attention, it was noted that her quirk, Gigantification, certainly made her a crowd favorite due to her impressive looks and attitude. However, it was also observed that navigating the city without causing significant damage would be a challenge for her, which might limit her usefulness. The observer jotted down thoughts in a notebook, pondering the implications of her abilities. A man who had been sitting next to me earlier asked if I wanted to be a hero too. I replied with a big, happy smile, expressing that I wanted it more than anything. In Bakugo's perspective, the teacher entered the classroom and announced that as third-year students, it was time to start thinking seriously about their futures and what they wanted to do with their lives. The teacher mentioned the possibility of passing out some career attitude tests. Katsuki declared that he and Izuku were the real deal, while the rest of the class, except for Izuku, reacted with shouts and jeers. He asserted that the others would be lucky to become sidekicks to lesser heroes. When challenged about his superiority, he confidently offered to take them all on. The teacher acknowledged their impressive test results, suggesting they might have a chance at UA High. One student noted that many were aiming for the national school, but another pointed out its extremely low acceptance rate, deeming it nearly impossible to get in. Katsuki jumped onto a desk, proclaiming that he and Izuku were the only ones at their school with a real chance of acceptance. They had aced all the mock tests and believed they would become more popular than All Might, ultimately becoming the richest heroes known worldwide, starting with their admission to UA High. The class fell silent before erupting into laughter, with one student dismissing their chances. In response, Katsuki exploded with anger, causing the student's desk to break apart. He warned that when he became number one, the others shouldn't come to him for help. Izuku stood up and placed a hand on Katsuki's shoulder, urging him to calm down and reminding him that they needed to maintain a good record to get into UA. Katsuki begrudgingly agreed, allowing Izuku to guide him back to his seat. The teacher then redirected the class's attention to their work. Meanwhile, in a different scene, a woman with a force field quirk screamed as a shop worker yelled for her to stop. A man called for someone to catch the sludge monster, who was laughing as he fled with stolen money. The civilians expressed their frustration, wondering where the heroes were, recalling a time when they didn't have to worry about villains with quirks. Just then, a man emerged from a shop, inflating himself and declaring that he was there to help. Back at school, Izuku was urged by Katsuki to hurry up for their training session. Katsuki was eager to leave, while Izuku wanted to ensure he didn't forget anything. He decided to take the tunnel route to catch up. Katsuki reminded him not to be late, and Izuku assured him he would be on. Kaken yelled back, not even glancing over his shoulder, determined to keep moving. A time skip, marked by Present Mix's enthusiastic shout, signaled a shift in the scene. Izuku felt a surge of urgency as he raced through the tunnels, thinking that if he didn't hurry, Kaken would explode with frustration. Suddenly, he heard a slushing sound and turned around to see a giant green slime monster. The only distinct features were its eyes and mouth. It declared that Izuku would make a perfect skin suit for it to hide in. Without hesitation, Izuku turned and ran, but the sludge monster lunged at him, attempting to engulf him. As he struggled, the creature insisted that it was only taking over his body and that it would be easier for both of them if he didn't resist. It promised that the pain would be brief and that he would feel better soon. Izuku's mind raced with determination, refusing to let the villain escape. The slime monster expressed gratitude for Izuku's help, claiming to be unaware of its presence in the city. It needed to flee before being tracked down. On the count of 3, Izuku prepared to stop the monster. 1-2 crash. The sewer lid flew off, and All Might emerged dramatically, proclaiming his arrival. The sludge monster, panicking, threw a fist at All Might but missed. It then grabbed All Might with its other hand, but it was too late. All Might unleashed one of his signature moves. He shouted his attack, sending a powerful gust of air at the monster. The force split the creature apart, and Izuku was propelled backward, slamming into a wall. Fortunately, his quirk's regenerative abilities kept him safe. Groaning, Izuku sat up, exhilarated by the experience. He exclaimed how much fun it had been, stretching out his limbs. Suddenly, he remembered All Might and rushed to get his autograph as the hero moved past him to deal with the slime. All Might, focused on his task, struggled to contain the slime in plastic bottles. Izuku offered to help, using his quirk to manipulate plasma and assist in collecting the sludge. All Might questioned why Izuku hadn't used his quirk to escape earlier. Izuku explained that he had intended to but had chosen to let All Might handle the situation to avoid complicating things. He handed All Might his book for a signature and reassured him that he would be fine, thanking him for his concern. Raising an eyebrow, Izuku noted that All Might had withstood the plasma-turned lightning, a testament to his strength. All Might merely stared back, expressionless. After receiving the autograph, Izuku realized he was running late for training with Kaken and bid All Might farewell. The scene shifted to an alleyway where Kaken was growing impatient. He kicked a bottle in frustration, which cracked open, releasing sludge. Suddenly, the sludge transformed into a massive slime monster, which grabbed Kaken and dragged him into the street. Despite his attempts to escape using explosions, he found himself trapped. As chaos erupted, the heroes arrived. Kamui announced that someone was being held hostage, while Death Arms charged at the villain. He attempted to punch the monster but found his arm ensnared in the goo. He was thrown back against a metal pole, and another hero rushed to check on him. Kamui warned everyone to watch out as the sludge monster attacked again. The villain taunted, threatening Kaken while continuing to force sludge down his throat. Kaken felt darkness creeping into his vision from the lack of oxygen, but he summoned all his strength to push his head and chest out of the sludge, gasping for air. He declared that the monster had picked the wrong person to mess with and vowed to send it back to the sewer. With a surge of power, Kaken unleashed a massive explosion, pushing the heroes back. The villain, impressed by Kaken's strength, began to expand in size, claiming that with such power, he could take down All Might with one punch. In the crowd, someone remarked on the villain's impressive display, while another recognized the new hero, MT Lady, joining the fray. A lady declared that she would stop him. MT Lady complained about needing a wider path to navigate through the chaos. Meanwhile, Kamui Woods was busy saving people as he hung off the side of a building, yelling over the screams and the crackling of flames that fire and wood were not a good combination. He decided to leave the villain to someone else. Backdraft, who was focused on extinguishing fires, expressed his frustration, stating that he was overwhelmed and questioning the whereabouts of the fire trucks. He turned to Death Arms and the other heroes for assistance, admitting that he couldn't get a grip on the villain's unusual body and that the kid's quirk was causing explosions everywhere. Death Arms cursed under his breath, realizing they needed to rally together to take down the villain somehow. The villain laughed as he launched an attack on the heroes. One of them shouted a warning about an incoming attack. Death Arms yelled that none of them had the right quirks to stop someone like this, and they would have to focus on damage control until help arrived. Kamui reminded everyone that there were still many people to save, and he continued to rescue others, assuring them that every hero in the city would come to their aid. Death Arms, shaking with anger, thought about how he wished he had more power to defeat the villain. As a skeletal-looking figure dashed into the crowd, he realized he had dropped someone in the air while distracted by his time limit. He felt ashamed for making such a rookie mistake. Deku observed a crowd while on his way to train. He noticed an explosion, and sure enough, it was Kaken who was under attack by the sludge monster. Kaken needed to breathe, and the heroes were unable to help. Deku felt torn. He knew he could get in trouble if he intervened, but Kaken's desperate gaze locked onto his, pleading for help. After muttering to himself, Deku devised a plan. He pushed through the crowd and ran past the barriers set up by the heroes, stopping a few meters away from the sludge villain. He began to clap slowly, mocking Kaken and expressing disappointment in his performance. Kaken smirked, and the heroes warned Deku to stay back, but he waved them off. The sludge villain recognized him and prepared to attack. As the sludge lunged, Deku dodged gracefully, and amidst the chaos, he declared a challenge between plasma and sludge. He unleashed a wave of plasma that spread across the ground, grinning as he advanced while avoiding the villain's attacks. When he reached the sludge, he plunged his hand into its body, grasped Kaken's hand, and pulled him out with surprising strength. Kaken stood tall, ready to fight back, and encouraged Deku to show the villain what he could do. Deku expanded the plasma, absorbing heat from the flames and extinguishing them in the process. He then activated his phantom mode, disappearing into a green mist that spread across the street, while Kaken moved cautiously within it. Kamui Woods watched as the green-haired boy stepped out of the safe zone, clapping mockingly and challenging Kaken. The other heroes attempted to call him back, but he ignored them. The sludge villain reacted with annoyance, and Kamui wondered if they knew each other. Death Arms suggested they would need to question the boy later. As the boy approached, the villain attacked, and Kamui shouted for him to get away. The crowd screamed as the sludge seemed to crush him, but then the boy confidently declared a challenge, and a green mist began to form around him. Kamui was astonished that the boy showed no fear as he continued to advance, dodging the villain's attacks effortlessly. Once he reached the villain, he reached into the sludge, pulling Kaken out with incredible strength. The boy spoke to Kaken, and Kamui caught snippets of their conversation about a show and revenge. Suddenly, the mist thickened, obscuring their view, but they could feel the fires extinguishing. For the next few minutes, explosions, screams, and laughter filled the air, accompanied by flashes of light and sound. When the mist cleared, the green-haired boy approached the heroes, handing Kamui a bottle and instructing him to collect more from the area. Death Arms watched as the boy approached him, stating that he would need to give a statement quickly since he and Kaken still had training to do. Death Arms nodded, and they moved toward the police to provide their accounts. He asked the boy for his name, age, and quirk. The boy smiled and introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya, age 14, and explained that his quirk was Phantom Life. When Death Arms inquired about the green mist, the boy corrected him, saying it was plasma, not mist. He then described how he raised the plasma to obscure the villain's vision and created a mini storm of lightning and plasma, all while laughing as he and Kaken attacked the villain. Death Arms pressed further, asking why the villain had recognized him. The boy sighed, ready to explain. The same monster had attacked earlier that day, but All Might had managed to stop and capture it. The question lingered in the air: how had it escaped? The boy turned to the other kid, eager to get his statement. He approached, ready to answer questions from the media. The other boy, Katsuki Bakugo, seemed irritated but was still willing to share. He introduced himself, stating his age and quirk with a hint of annoyance. It was going to be a long day as he answered all the questions. Izuku and Katsuki were on their way to the quirk gym where they trained when Katsuki unexpectedly expressed gratitude for being saved. His ears turned red from embarrassment, and Izuku reassured him that friends were there to help each other. Katsuki smirked, insisting that this didn't make Izuku better than him. Though his tone was angry, those who knew him understood that he was neither truly angry nor happy, he was simply being himself. Izuku brought up a childhood promise they had made to work together to become the best heroes. He wondered if they could truly achieve that, noting how Katsuki had calmed his aggressive demeanor over the years. Katsuki interrupted, declaring that if people wanted to think of them as villains, that was their problem. They were determined to prove everyone wrong by becoming number one. Izuku sighed, realizing that Katsuki was right. It didn't matter what others thought, only what they believed in mattered. As they continued, Izuku playfully skipped backward to talk to Katsuki, but Katsuki stopped in his tracks, staring wide-eyed. Izuku turned to see that he had bumped into All Might, who had caught up to them. All Might greeted them enthusiastically, expressing his desire to train them. Katsuki reacted with disbelief, exclaiming that they should be excited to meet the number one hero. All Might's booming voice filled the air as he insisted they could become heroes under his guidance. Izuku politely declined, wanting to earn their achievements on their own. Katsuki echoed his sentiment, and they both turned to leave, catching a glimpse of All Might's surprised expression. As they walked away, All Might reflected on the strength of the two boys. He wondered if they would eventually surpass him and become number one. For now, he would keep an eye on them, even as he transformed back into his weaker form and headed home. Katsuki remarked on the encounter, still in disbelief that All Might wanted to train them. Izuku reminded him of their promise to become the best together without relying on anyone else. Katsuki playfully asserted his own strengths, and Izuku revealed that he had something for him, having run into All Might earlier during the sludge monster incident. As they entered the gym, Izuku pulled out his hero book, showing Katsuki a page signed by All Might. He had gotten the signature for Katsuki, knowing he wouldn't ask for it himself. Katsuki appreciated the gesture but insisted they needed to prove they could succeed on their own. Izuku nodded, placing the book safely in his backpack, determined to focus on their training ahead. He smirked as he closed the locker and declared that it was time to see who would win this point. With confidence, he stated that there was no doubt he would come out on top. In response, he mentioned that he had been working on a new move and got into a fighting position, to which his opponent replied that they were both prepared for the challenge. They stood ready, waiting for the first move. Clenching his fist, he charged forward, unleashing a powerful shockwave accompanied by a flicker of flames, calling it the Rattle Wave. His opponent transformed into a plasma form, soaring into the air like a bird, with a green glow emanating from his eye sockets. He announced his move, the Death Bird, and with a powerful flap of his wings, he dove toward his opponent at incredible speed. The impact created a burst of plasma that spread around, obscuring the view. Frustrated, he muttered to himself, unable to see, while his opponent taunted him to come and get him as they continued their training for UA. Time passed, and now it was the day they had both been eagerly anticipating, the day of the entrance exam for UA, their dream school. On the train, he recalled the bet he had made with his friend, Kaken, about who would perform better in the exam. Kaken was confident that he would win and declared that the loser would have to do the winner's chores for the rest of the year. As the train arrived at their stop, they got off and headed toward the imposing gates of UA. They arrived just in time, though he felt a bit shaky with nerves. Kaken, putting on his tough guy act, urged him to hurry up or he would set him on fire. He chuckled nervously and pretended to be frightened as Kaken walked past him. He wished them both good luck, watching as Kaken smirked while other students began to talk about them, recognizing them as the kids who had defeated the sludge villain. As he walked, he felt a surge of determination, thinking about how they would become heroes through their hard work. However, he stumbled over his own feet and braced himself for a fall. Just before he hit the ground, a girl's voice called out to him, asking if he was okay. She had used her quirk to stop him from falling and apologized for not asking first. She smiled warmly, her brown bob cut framing her rosy cheeks and big brown eyes. He was momentarily taken aback by her kindness and beauty. She remarked on how nerve-wracking the situation was before saying she would see him inside. As she walked away, he could only stare in awe, feeling a mix of admiration and embarrassment. He knew Kaken would tease him about needing a girl to save him. At the exam orientation, he sat next to Kaken as the stage lights illuminated one by one, ready for the challenges that lay ahead. Thanks for tuning in to the school DJ, Present Mike, who eagerly encouraged the audience to respond. However, silence filled the air. He chuckled, keeping the mood light, and then shifted to discussing the practical exam. He asked if everyone was ready, his excitement palpable. In the crowd, a student marveled at Present Mike's voice, expressing admiration for his radio show and the fact that UA teachers were professional heroes. Another student, Kaken, interrupted, asking for quiet. Present Mike continued, explaining that the students would engage in 10-minute mock battles in suburban cities. He instructed them to check their cards, which indicated their assigned battle centers. Kaken noted that they were being separated, and Izuku confirmed that their examinee numbers were consecutive but assigned to different locations. Kaken expressed his disappointment at not being able to face Izuku directly. Present Mike elaborated on the exam, describing 3 types of villains they would encounter, emphasizing the importance of strategy in choosing targets. He warned against attacking fellow examinees, reminding everyone to keep things heroic. A tall student with blue hair raised a question about the number of villain types listed, pointing out a discrepancy in the official materials. Present Mike acknowledged the concern, clarifying that the 4th villain was merely an obstacle worth no points, encouraging the students to focus on the more challenging targets. As the student returned to his seat, others around him compared the situation to video games, finding the concept relatable. Present Mike concluded with a motivational message, quoting a famous figure about overcoming adversity and wishing everyone good luck. Izuku reflected on the upcoming battles, feeling a mix of determination and anxiety. He was ready to put his training with Kaken to the test, aspiring to become a hero as he had always dreamed. As he scanned the area, he spotted a familiar face, the kind girl he had met at the school gates, who was also assigned to his battle center. Just as he began to approach her, a hand landed on his shoulder, and he turned to see the same student who had challenged him during orientation. The student questioned his presence, suggesting he was there to disrupt others. Izuku confidently denied the accusation, locking eyes with his rival, feeling a sense of relief that at least one less competitor was a concern. Lucky for them, some others commented on the situation. The protagonist felt as if the others believed they had lucked out because they were there, but they were ready to prove themselves. As the countdown began, Present Mike shouted for everyone to start. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist generated an immense amount of plasma, making it difficult for others to see, except for them. They dashed forward, creating plasma as they ran, and heard Present Mike yell for everyone to hurry up, reminding them that there were no countdowns in a real fight. As the protagonists sprinted down the street, a wall suddenly collapsed, and a one-pointer robot emerged, declaring its intent to eliminate them. The protagonist charged at the robot, transforming into plasma and slipping through its cracks before re-emerging on the other side. They looked back at the slowly melting robot, feeling confident. They had simply superheated the plasma to melt its insides. With determination, they continued running, using the same tactic on every robot they encountered. As they approached the center of the battlefield, they noticed defeated villains scattered everywhere. Excitement surged within them as they raised their hand and snapped their fingers. Explosions erupted around them, and when the chaos subsided, they lowered their hand, smiling at the stunned onlookers. They had electrified the robots with so much power that they exploded. Feeling a bit bored, they called out to the others, urging them to snap out of their shock and continue fighting. The protagonist absorbed the plasma back into themselves and walked over to a bench to observe the others, knowing they couldn't claim all the points. They watched as a kind girl floated and then dropped some robots, announcing her points. A rude guy flew past, crashing into a robot and declaring his score. Another competitor ripped off a robot's arm and tossed it into the air, claiming his points. The atmosphere was charged with competition. Meanwhile, in the camera room, a small creature explained the practical exam. The examinees had not been informed of the number of villains or their locations, and they had a limited amount of time in the vast area. They needed to draw out the villains to gather information while demonstrating their mobility, calmness in chaos, and combat skills. These abilities were essential for maintaining peace on the streets, and points were awarded based on performance. Observers noted that this year's group looked promising, but their true test was still ahead. Back in the field, the protagonist continued to watch the others when suddenly an explosion rocked the area, and it wasn't caused by Katsuki. The ground trembled, and panic spread among the crowd. The protagonist reassured everyone that it wasn't their doing and stepped forward to confront the source of the chaos. A giant robot, larger than the buildings, emerged, smashing through structures and destroying the road. As everyone fled in terror, the protagonist remained still, observing the robot. Present Mike announced that there were less than 2 minutes left in the exam. Amid the chaos, the protagonist heard someone in distress and turned to see the kind girl trapped under rubble. In that moment, they unleashed a burst of plasma, wrapping it around the robot as they rushed to help the girl. Using plasma, they carefully cleared the rubble and moved her towards safety. Standing tall, the protagonist faced the robot, now mostly encased in plasma. They declared a platonic burst, clenching their fist. The robot began to glow as the plasma turned purple, heating up and compressing the machine. The plasma brightened, and sparks flew before the energy exploded in a dazzling display of white, green, and purple light. Seconds later, the protagonist collapsed to their knees, smirking at the exertion. Using so much power at once had drained them, but they noted it as another weakness to consider. They wondered how Katsuki had performed and how many points he had scored, planning to ask him later. Slowly, they rose to ensure no one was harmed by their outburst and to check on the girl. As they walked, their muscles strained, and suddenly an alarm blared. Present Mike announced that time was up, but the protagonist continued moving as everyone stared at them. An elderly woman, whom they recognized as Recovery Girl, approached, offering gummies as a reward for their efforts. That's when a fancy blonde kid remarked that the young lady was the backbone of UA. She then approached and noted how I seemed hurt by my own quirk. I reassured her that I was fine, as my quirk included regeneration, but it was the others I was concerned about. As I walked past her, she suggested I sit down and rest, but I shook my head and continued toward the girl who needed help. I asked her if she was okay, and she thanked me for saving her with a smile. I smiled back and told her I had to go, wishing her luck in getting in as I exited to find Kaken waiting for me. He smirked and commented on my delay as we began to walk back at a slower pace, my legs still wobbly. I guessed he had enjoyed destroying the robots, and he enthusiastically agreed, expressing how much fun it was to take down everything that moved, even letting out a small explosion from his fist. I chuckled, knowing that was just like him. Later, during dinner, my mother interrupted my thoughts, asking why I was smiling at a fish for so long. I snapped out of my daze and assured her I was fine. As the days passed, I reflected on my performance in the exams, feeling confident I had passed the written portion and hoping I had enough points in the practical exam to get in. My mother mentioned that the results should arrive soon, and I confirmed this. She smiled, expressing her amazement that I had even applied to UA. Moments later, she burst through the door, frantically calling my name and holding a UA letter. I stood up, took the letter, and retreated to my room, closing the door behind me. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the letter before tearing it open, revealing a gray disc that lit up to display All Might's face. He announced his presence as a projection, and I stepped back in shock, confirming that this was indeed from UA. All Might explained that he had come to work at UA and that I had passed the written test with flying colors, scoring 86 points in the practical exam. I couldn't believe it, I had actually done it. However, he continued, explaining that the entrance exam was graded not only on villain points but also on rescue points awarded by a panel of judges. I had earned 60 rescue points, bringing my total to 146 points. This was my hero academia, and I couldn't contain my excitement as tears filled my eyes. On the first day of school, Kaken and Kirishima were already arguing about who was the best hero between All Might and Crimson Riot. Ever since we found out we both got into UA, Kaken and I had been training non-stop, brainstorming ways to impress the other students. I recalled that All Might had met with us shortly after I received my acceptance letter, and I knew I would never look at him the same way again. I noted that Kaken had likely gone to class early to scope out the competition, and I hoped everything would be fine as long as no one was seriously hurt when I arrived. As I prepared to leave, my mother called out to me, running over with a smile, telling me I was really cool. I returned her smile and said goodbye as I stepped out. Arriving at UA, I was overwhelmed by the size of the building as I searched for Class 1A. When I finally found the door, I wondered if it was designed for accessibility, considering the elite students chosen from so many applicants. I slid the door open, greeted by the sounds of yelling inside. A student with glasses was reprimanding Kaken for putting his feet on the desk, to which Kaken simply smirked. The glasses-wearing student, Tenya Ida, introduced himself, and Kaken taunted him about being from a prestigious academy. The tension was palpable as they exchanged words, and then they both turned to me. I awkwardly greeted them, introducing myself as Midoriya. Tenya acknowledged my presence and remarked that he had misjudged me, admitting I was better than he had thought. I felt a rush of embarrassment as I apologized for not realizing the complexities of the practical exam. Just then, a cheerful voice broke through the tension, and I turned to see the girl I had saved. She recognized me and mentioned that I had passed, just as Present Mike had said. Of course, the explosion was incredible, and she began to jump around in excitement. The protagonist, feeling a bit overwhelmed, responded modestly, acknowledging that they had only done what any hero would do. As their hair started to flicker with energy, they attempted to regain control amidst the happiness. But the girl wondered if today was just the entrance ceremony and orientation, expressing curiosity about their teacher and a hint of nervousness. The protagonist shuffled away, trying to manage their hair. Suddenly, a voice interrupted them, suggesting they find somewhere else to play at being friends. Turning around, the protagonist saw a figure resembling a yellow caterpillar on the ground, with tired eyes and messy black hair. The figure introduced himself in a weary tone, revealing that he was their teacher, Shota Aizawa. As he unzipped a sleeping bag, the protagonist recognized him as Eraserhead, one of their favorite heroes. Aizawa instructed everyone to put on sports outfits and head outside. Once outside, the class expressed excitement about the quirk assessment test, but Uraraka questioned whether they would miss orientation. Aizawa explained that at UA, they were not bound by traditions and that he would run his class as he saw fit. He noted that students had taken standardized tests their whole lives but had never used their quirks in practical exams. He emphasized the importance of understanding their maximum capabilities as future heroes. Midoriya, who had scored the highest in the entrance exam, was asked about his longest throw with a softball. After some hesitation, he estimated it to be around 45 meters. Aizawa encouraged him to try again using his quirk. As Midoriya stepped into the circle, he prepared to throw. With Bakugo's encouragement, Midoriya unleashed his power, and the ball soared through the air, surrounded by a green mist that exploded in a burst, propelling it even further. The class was astonished by the distance, and Kaminari exclaimed in disbelief. Ashido eagerly wanted to try, while Shiro expressed enthusiasm about using their quirks freely. Aizawa reminded them that while it seemed fun, they had 3 years to become heroes, and today they would compete in 8 physical tests to determine their potential. He warned that those who came in last would be expelled immediately, causing a wave of panic among the students. Aizawa asserted his authority over the class, indicating that if anyone had a problem with his methods, they could leave right then and there. Uraraka protested, pointing out that they had just arrived, but before Aizawa could respond, Midoriya interrupted with a question about natural disasters. The world was filled with power-hungry villains and catastrophic accidents that could wipe out entire cities. It was unfair, and it was a hero's job to combat that unfairness. To become a professional hero, one had to push themselves to the brink. As he finished speaking, the instructor took a moment to address the students. For the next 3 years, UA would throw one hardship after another at them, so they needed to go beyond their limits and show that they belonged there. Everyone seemed pumped up except for Midoriya, who lazily walked over to Bakugo and stood beside him. The instructor declared that they were wasting time talking and that it was time for the games to begin. The first event was a 50-meter race, with Tsuyu playfully slapping Mineta with her tongue as a humorous introduction. The robot at the end of the field called the runners to their marks. As Inda and Azui prepared to race, the robot made a gun noise, and the students took off. Inda crossed the finish line in 3.04 seconds. The instructor noted that while Inda was definitely in his element, speed alone wouldn't help him in every task. As the next group got ready, Uraraka mentioned she would lighten her clothing for the race. In the following group, Aoyama complimented Mineta but added that he wasn't showing much sparkle, shooting a laser from his belt that fizzled out halfway, allowing Ashido to win that round. The robot called the next runners to their marks, and Bakugo and Midoriya prepared to race. With a loud bang, Bakugo shouted, "Burst speed," as he took off, explosions trailing behind him. Midoriya, however, stood still for a moment before disappearing and reappearing at the sound of the robot's signal. The robot announced their times: 3.14 seconds for Bakugo and 4.13 seconds for Midoriya. The instructor observed as Midoriya yawned while Bakugo walked over, letting smoke escape from his hands, claiming their quirks were more versatile than anyone else's in the school. Next was the strength test, where the instructor watched as Shoji used his 3 arms to lift an impressive 540 kilograms, the highest score so far. The others achieved reasonable scores, but when Midoriya attempted his strength test, he lifted 324 kilograms. The instructor marveled at how strong Midoriya was, considering his appearance. The long jump event was introduced with Ashido enthusiastically singing about pink fluffy unicorns. The instructor called Midoriya up for his turn. With a smile, he approached the sand and jumped, soaring through the air. He asked if there was a maximum distance he could reach or if he could go indefinitely. The instructor, slightly bewildered, told him to just come down, as there was no limit to his jump. During the sidestep event, Mineta surprisingly performed well, using his quirk to bounce side to side, while Midoriya stood still for a moment before starting to sidestep slowly. At the end of class, the instructor prepared to give the results. He ranked the students from best to worst, revealing the top scores. Yaoyorozu, Todoroki, Bakugo, Inda, and Midoriya were among the top rankings, with Mineta at the bottom. The instructor then revealed that no one was going home. It had all been a ruse to ensure they gave their best effort during the tests. Most of the class reacted with surprise, and Yaoyorozu commented that she was sorry for not mentioning it earlier, causing the class to quiet down and focus on her. The instructor turned to Midoriya, asking why he hadn't tried harder in the last 4 tests, as he could have achieved a better score. Midoriya simply lay down and remarked that there was no point in wasting time on the test just to get a good score when he could focus on something more important. In a flash of green light, reminiscent of his earlier performance, He disappeared and reappeared next to the instructor, asking if he could go get his homework and leave. He mentioned wanting to finish it and inquired if there was any extra work, as he didn't plan on sleeping that night. The instructor announced that class was over for the day and instructed the students to pick up their assignments in the classroom and review them before the next morning. As he walked away, he heard the students yelling. Turning around, he saw Midoriya had changed and was waiting for Bakugo, urging him to hurry up so they could leave. Midoriya expressed his desire to go to Bakugo's place and talk with Mitsuki until Bakugo arrived. He playfully warned the instructor not to stare, leaving the instructor puzzled about how he had known. Bakugo yelled back, questioning Midoriya's behavior and urging him to hurry. In class, Midoriya reflected on the normal classes they had, like English, which took place in the mornings. They enjoyed lunch in the main cafeteria, where they could buy tasty food at reasonable prices. Finally, it was time for hero basic training in the afternoon. As the class buzzed with excitement, All Might walked through the door, instantly capturing everyone's attention. However, the atmosphere shifted when a screeching sound erupted from a nearby chair, sending it flying as Deku stood up. He approached the window, opened it, and leaped out. Kaken observed All Might with growing frustration. The more he watched, the more he wanted to shout at him for expecting Deku and himself to clean a beach after revealing that he had done nothing to help them when they were trapped by the sludge villain. All Might, the #1 hero, was supposed to prevent villains from escaping, not hesitate. Kaken's thoughts were interrupted when he saw Deku jump out of the window. Concern rippled through the class, and All Might rushed to the window, calling out in alarm. Kaken, annoyed, dismissed their worries, insisting that Deku would be fine and would return shortly. Suddenly, Kaken felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Midoriya standing there. Midoriya explained that he just needed some fresh air and urged All Might to continue the lesson before he really left the school grounds. Kaken, unwilling to let Midoriya go alone, insisted that he wouldn't allow it. All Might, attempting to mediate, apologized, but both Kaken and Midoriya shouted their refusal to accept it. Kaken demanded that All Might apologize properly, and to his surprise, Deku nodded in agreement. All Might sighed and got down on his knees, expressing his regret for failing them as a hero. The class watched in stunned silence as Kaken told All Might to get up and teach the class. As All Might regained his composure and stood, the students erupted with questions about the unexpected apology. Ignoring their inquiries, All Might introduced the class to Heroing 101, where they would learn the fundamentals of being a pro-hero and fighting for justice. He announced that the day's lesson would focus on battle training. Kaken exchanged glances with Deku, both smirking at the prospect of real combat. All Might emphasized that looking good was also essential for heroes and directed them to the wall, where their costumes awaited them. As the boxes containing their outfits emerged, the entire class responded enthusiastically, eager to gear up. All Might reminded them that the clothes made the heroes, and they were now all heroes in training. Deku's hero costume was ready. All Might announced that it was time for combat training. Ida raised his hand and pointed out that they were in the same city as their entrance exam, wondering if they would be conducting urban battles again. All Might explained that they were moving 2 steps ahead. Most villain fights seen on the news occurred outside, but the most cunning criminals operated indoors. He emphasized that this training exercise would involve teams of heroes and villains engaging in 2-on-2 indoor battles. Azui, the frog girl, expressed concern about the advanced nature of the training. All Might reassured them that the best training came from real battlefield experience, but this time they would be dealing with actual people, not just robots. Yaoyorozu asked if All Might would decide the winners, while Kaken inquired about how much they could hurt the opposing team. Uraraka worried about the possibility of losers facing expulsion, and Ida asked whether teams would be chosen randomly or based on skill. All Might explain the situation. The villains had hidden a nuclear missile in their hideout, and the heroes needed to thwart their plans by either capturing the villains or recovering the weapon. The villains, in turn, had to protect their payload or capture the heroes, with time being limited. Teams would be chosen by drawing lots. Ida raised his hand again, suggesting there might be a better way to form teams. Deku pointed out that professionals often needed to team up with heroes from other agencies on the spot, which was likely why they were seeing this approach. Ida acknowledged this with a bow, and they proceeded to draw lots. In the end, Deku was teamed with Uraraka and Kaken, while Ida found himself matched against Todoroki and Shoji. All Might declared the first teams to fight, pulling 2 balls from a box, 1 black with a white D, and 1 white with a black A. Team A would be the heroes, and Team D would be the villains. Everyone else was instructed to head to the monitoring room to watch. As the villains prepared, All Might reminded Kaken and Ida that the key to success in this challenge was to embody villainy, thinking from the perspective of an evildoer. He assured them that he would step in if things went too far. Ida felt conflicted about becoming a villain, even in training, as he approached the fake bomb and confirmed its status. Uraraka found it challenging to memorize the building's floor plans, noting how impressive All Might was in person. She appreciated that he wasn't threatening them with punishment like Mr. Aizawa, allowing them to relax. Turning to Midoriya, she noticed him crouched down, playing with the green mist he produced. Midoriya explained that he was devising a plan, acknowledging that Kaken was a tough opponent and that Indo would also be a challenge. He stood up, determined, and mentioned that Bakugo was always angry but incredibly strong, confident, and ambitious. He resolved to fight at full power that day, putting on his mask and declaring it a fated battle between rivals. As the training began, All Might announced that Team A and Team D's time had started. Deku and Uraraka jumped into the building through a window, and Deku started to cover the floors with a thin layer of plasma to conceal their presence, confirming their entry into the building. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes to cover the entire building, but time was not on their side. They needed to cover as much ground as possible. As Uraraka and Deku walked through the halls, Kaken suddenly jumped out from behind a corner, launching an explosive punch at them. Deku quickly pushed Uraraka aside to dodge the attack. He checked on her, asking if she was okay, to which she replied affirmatively, grateful for his quick thinking. Kaken shouted for Deku to fight him as he charged forward. Deku managed to grab Kaken's arm just as he swung a right hook, using Kaken's momentum to throw him over his shoulder. Kaken landed on his back but quickly got up, turning to face Deku. Kaken yelled at him to shut up and defend himself, claiming he had more important matters to attend to. Deku observed as Kaken spoke into his earpiece, likely communicating with Inda. Kaken then prepared to unleash another explosive attack. Deku called out to Uraraka to run, and she took off. Kaken taunted Deku about getting rid of the extra distraction as Deku attempted to wrap Kaken's leg in capture tape. Kaken swung another explosive punch, narrowly missing Deku. Kaken readied himself for a leap attack, but Deku used the plasma he had set down to his advantage, transforming into plasma and merging with it. Kaken yelled for Deku to come out and fight, but Deku was hidden within the mist of plasma. Kaken felt the air grow thin as the plasma filled the halls, and he realized he couldn't use his explosions without air. Frustration boiled within him as he ran toward a window, determined to escape the suffocating mist. Deku's voice echoed from behind, challenging Kaken to choose between fighting or reaching the window. Kaken grit his teeth and continued his sprint. As he neared the window, he heard Deku chuckle. Turning around, he saw only Deku's torso, the rest of him a swirling mass of plasma rushing toward him. Kaken cursed under his breath, feeling the pressure build as Deku pushed him down, taunting him about being so close to freedom. Deku's plasma began to spin, forming a tornado-like effect. He asked Kaken how much longer he could last without air. Kaken, feeling the darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision, knew he had to act quickly. He grabbed his gauntlet and aimed for the window, pulling the pin to release an explosion. Deku shouted that without air, Kaken couldn't create explosions, but Kaken smirked, revealing that his gauntlets collected sweat, which allowed him to ignite the air trapped inside. He took a fighting stance, ready for a showdown. Deku transformed fully into plasma and then lightning, speeding around Kaken while launching plasma blasts. Kaken dodged and countered, forcing Deku to retreat. Kaken boasted that he couldn't be beaten, but Deku countered that they were equal in hand-to-hand combat. Deku shifted back to his normal form, enveloping his hands and feet in green fire and lightning as he charged at Kaken. Kaken caught Deku's leg and swung him into a wall, taunting him for underestimating his abilities. Deku, determined, declared he would use his UD power. He pushed off the wall, tackling Kakin to the ground and surrounding his face with plasma, making his eyes glow. He announced that Kakin's time was up as he wrapped plasma around Kakin's hands and reached for the capture tape. However, Kakin headbutted him, breaking free and delivering an explosive punch to Deku's face. Kakin yelled in frustration as he fired his other gauntlet at Deku, who transformed into plasma and flew out the window to evade the attack. Kakin shouted for Deku to return, but Deku's mist began to descend, taking on a slight purple hue. He prepared to unleash a powerful move, calling out, "Phantom Storm," as he split into 20 to 30 plasma ball, each one creating an explosion upon impact with the building. In the monitoring room, panic ensued. Kaminari exclaimed that someone would get hurt if the fight continued, urging All Might to intervene. Kirishima nodded in agreement, sharing the concern for the safety of everyone involved. All Might expressed his desire to stop the fight between young Bakugo and Midoriya, knowing that if he intervened now, they would only continue later. With 3 minutes remaining on the timer, he decided to wait. The group stared at the computer, eager for the smoke to clear. Aoyama pointed at the screen, drawing attention to Midoriya and Bakugo, who were swaying slightly, covered in burns. Midoriya was slowly healing, but his joints were tightening from overusing his quirk. As Bakugo took a step forward, the students whispered in disbelief at his resilience. He moved closer, lifting his arm for an explosion, only for Midoriya to grab it and lift his own arm simultaneously. Midoriya maneuvered Bakugo's hand around his neck, smirking as Bakugo's eyes widened in surprise. He stumbled back, falling onto the ground. Midoriya's hand began to glow, a thick purple mist spiraling before shooting upward, causing destruction to the floors above. He then staggered toward Bakugo, extending his hand, which was now crackling with green electricity. As he fell due to cramps in his joints, the electric energy struck Bakugo, who reacted with a startled scream and crawled away, accusing Midoriya of having a plan all along. In the aftermath of Midoriya's destructive move, Uraraka managed to secure the weapon, and All Might announced the hero team's victory over the speakers. He instructed the robots to take Midoriya and Bakugo to the nurse's office, to which they acknowledged as they passed him. After a brief time skip, thanks to Kaminari's antics with Todoroki, All Might declared Ida the MVP of the exercise. The class began to voice their opinions, questioning why the MVP wasn't one of the heroes. Azui raised a valid point, prompting All Might to reflect on his choice. Yaoyorozu explained that Ida had embraced the challenge, adapting well to his role. She pointed out that Bakugo's judgment was clouded by his rivalry with Midoriya, leading to reckless decisions, while Midoriya's plan had also been poorly thought out. Uraraka had let her guard down, and Ida had remained focused on his mission, which ultimately made him deserving of the MVP title. All Might acknowledged Yaoyorozu's insights, agreeing that while Ida could have relaxed a bit, she had nailed the analysis. He emphasized the importance of starting with the basics and committing fully to learning to become a top hero. The class listened attentively. With a call to action, All Might encouraged the students to reflect on what they had learned as they prepared for the next match. The class responded in unison, ready to move on. After training, All Might congratulated everyone on their performance, noting that there were no serious injuries apart from Bakugo's. He praised their teamwork, especially considering it was their first training exercise. He reminded them that teachers could hold no-nonsense classes if they chose and announced he was off to evaluate Midoriya and Bakugo. He urged the students to change out of their costumes and head back to the classroom. As he rushed to the nurse's office, All Might transformed back to his normal self upon arrival. He confronted Bakugo and Midoriya, expressing his frustration over their reckless behavior. Midoriya greeted him with a stiff acknowledgement, while Bakugo stood up and approached Midoriya's bed, dismissing the idea that he could have seriously harmed him. Midoriya revealed that while he could have harmed Bakugo, he had kept some secrets about his quirk. All Might expressed his desire to know more, having known them for nearly a year. Midoriya stated he would share when the time was right, prompting Bakugo to stretch and remind them to get back to class once they were done. As Bakugo and Midoriya entered the classroom, Kirishima excitedly announced their return, and the room quickly filled with classmates eager to discuss the battle. They shared their excitement about the training, with various students introducing themselves and expressing their admiration for Bakugo and Midoriya's performance. Round-faced classmates expressed concern for Midoriya, who had fainted during the battle, showing their camaraderie and support. Uraraka greeted Deku with a smile, explaining that he hadn't fainted but simply couldn't move due to his quirk causing his joints to stiffen. He smiled, a hint of red on his ears. That afternoon was marked by Aizawa, who was covered in cats. Uraraka noted that while Deku was improving in hand-to-hand combat, he was still too slow in his normal form and had overused his quirk. She offered to help him with his hand-to-hand skills as they walked home together. Deku appreciated the offer, acknowledging that she had done well not to fall for his trap and had continued running toward the window. Uraraka proudly declared that she had bested All Might's criticism, feeling one step closer to being number one. Deku chuckled, agreeing that she had improved but reminded her that they still needed to have their daily training match at the gym to maintain their spot. As they reached the train station, Uraraka mentioned that Deku was coming over for dinner that evening. He playfully put his arm around her neck, saying he would have all night to practice and improve. Uraraka insisted that they had school the next day, so he needed to rest and let his muscles relax. She ruffled his hair, teasing him about his round face. Deku turned red and fumbled with his words, stuttering as he claimed he was just not used to talking to girls. Uraraka called him a nerd as they sat in silence until the train arrived at their stop. Once they got off the bus, Uraraka grabbed Deku's arm and playfully dragged him out. He reminded her that he could walk on his own, but she insisted he was too slow and urged him to hurry up since they had training to do before dinner. As they walked home, Deku asked her opinion on their class and if she thought anyone would be a challenge. Uraraka mentioned that she had heard the candy cane hero might be a good opponent, although she hadn't seen his abilities in action. Deku recalled that he had frozen an entire building, giving his team no chance of winning. Uraraka playfully complained about his mumbling, to which Deku responded that it was a habit. Upon entering his house, he called out to his mother, Inko, announcing their arrival. She greeted them warmly and asked how their day at school had been. Uraraka shared that she had lost to Midoriya's team in a 2-on-2 battle. Inko expressed surprise, noting that she thought they were equal in power. Uraraka clarified that they both had been unable to move after the battle, and Deku had only won thanks to his partner. He added that it was more about his plan and Uraraka's help. Uraraka teased him about his plan to destroy most of the building, but Deku argued that it had worked. After changing, they prepared to leave, with Uraraka bidding farewell to Inko. Deku echoed her goodbye as they stepped out. Later, after gym class, they arrived at the Bakugo household for dinner. Mitsuki called out to them from the dining room, announcing that dinner was ready. Uraraka and Deku decided to race down the stairs to the dining room, using their quirks to speed up the process. Deku felt victorious as he sat at the table, grabbing his chopsticks and declaring his win. Bakugo grumbled that Deku only won because he could practically fly. Mitsuki scolded Bakugo for his language in the house, and he responded with his usual fiery spirit. Mitsuki shouted at Kaken, expressing her frustration as she playfully hit him on the head. The bickering between them continued for about an hour, only pausing when Kaken announced he was going to bed since they had school the next day. Mitsuki called out a cheerful, "Good night," before turning to me with a smile that quickly faded when Kaken stomped over. He declared that he was going to ensure I got to sleep, picking me up and carrying me to my room, where he gently dropped me onto the bed, commanding me to sleep before leaving the room. I whispered to myself about how long it had been since I last slept, recalling it was around 7 months ago. As I settled into bed, I closed my eyes and wished myself a good night. Time passed, and I was stirred awake by the buzzing of my phone. I turned my head to see it vibrating on the nightstand. Curiosity struck me as I wondered who could be texting me at such an odd hour, likely around 2 or 3 in the morning. I reached for my phone and saw a message from an unknown number. The first message read, "Hi little Mitama." The second followed, stating, "We're coming for you, Mitama, and don't think you and Kodabasudo Koba can stop it." The last message ominously concluded with, "Bye bye little Mitama from FT." Panic surged through me as I realized who it was. I rushed into Kaken's room, shaking him awake. he groaned, clearly annoyed at being disturbed so early, but I urgently shoved my phone into his hands, whispering that she was back. Kaken's expression shifted to one of concern as he processed the information. He insisted that I keep this a secret and urged me to update him on any messages I received. He speculated whether they might know where we lived since they had my phone number, but I reassured him that there were no records of our move. The government was helping to keep our location a secret, known only to a few heroes and officials, and even our teachers were unaware. Kaken remained tense, emphasizing that they were coming for me and that I shouldn't leave his sight. He warned me against telling our parents or the government, fearing they would panic and restrict our freedom. I promised not to tell anyone, and as I moved to look out the window, he tried to calm me down, suggesting we both get some more sleep. Despite his insistence, I felt too on edge to sleep, and he reluctantly agreed to let me stay in his room for the night. I sighed, wondering why I had to receive such alarming news when I was trying to rest. As the night wore on, I reflected on the strange circumstances surrounding my quirk. I had always been different, made of plasma rather than smoke, a unique combination of heat and electricity. This quirk had been unstable for my father, Hisashi, but I had somehow managed to control it, thanks to my regeneration and telekinesis. My abilities allowed me to produce plasma in various forms, including mist and blasts, and I could even transform my body parts into plasma, enabling me to disappear and reappear at will. Despite my undead status, which meant I didn't need to eat, breathe, or sleep, I often found myself bored and restless. My personality was generally kind and cheerful, but the energy from my plasma could sometimes overwhelm me, leading to hyperactive outbursts. I had to be careful not to overexert myself, as it could cause my body to cramp and leave me unable to move for a while. As I lay there, I pondered the implications of my situation and the mysterious messages. The world around me felt uncertain, and I knew I had to stay vigilant. The ongoing speculation about the students in Class 1A stirred up a lot of debate. Some believed that the students in Class 1B were better suited to be heroes, but that was just one perspective. The desire for answers lingered. As Deku made his way through the throng of reporters at the school gate, a news reporter inquired about All Might's classes. He politely pushed past, expressing his need to get to class. Uraraka was approached by another reporter who asked her about All Might as a teacher. She smiled and described him as very muscular, trying to convey her admiration. Inda was also asked about All Might, and he spoke highly of the experience, noting that attending such a prestigious educational institution was a privilege. He mentioned All Might's dignity and character, but also highlighted the humorous side that students were fortunate enough to witness. The reporters seemed to regret asking him, wishing he would stop talking. Bakugo, irritated by the attention, confronted a reporter who recognized him as the one saved from the sludge villain. He growled in frustration, feeling that his own accomplishments were overlooked. Aizawa, observing the chaos, expressed his disdain for publicity. He informed the reporters that All Might was not on duty and requested that they leave, walking away through the gate. One of the reporters attempted to follow, but was caught off guard by the school's security barrier, which activated when someone without proper identification tried to enter. The reporter was shocked, and another man explained the security system in place. The news of All Might's hiring as a teacher at UA sent ripples through the nation, drawing media attention and causing a stir at the school. Aizawa commended the students on their recent combat training, having reviewed the video and results. He addressed Bakugo and Midoriya, urging them to mature and take their responsibilities seriously. He emphasized the importance of addressing their destructive tendencies and encouraged a sense of urgency. As Aizawa transitioned to homeroom business, the students appeared anxious, fearing another special test. Instead, he announced that they would be deciding on a class representative. The room erupted with excitement, each student eager to take on the role. Ida, however, called for silence, reminding everyone of the serious responsibility that came with leadership. He proposed an election to choose a true leader, prompting a mix of reactions from the class. Kaminari questioned Ida's suggestion, while Azui pointed out the lack of familiarity among them. Kirishima raised concerns about self-voting, and Inda suggested that those who received multiple votes could be considered the most suitable candidates. Aizawa, wrapped in his sleeping bag, stated he didn't care as long as a decision was made before homeroom ended. After the votes were cast, Bakugo observed the results, noting that Midoriya had received 3 votes and Yaoyorozu 2. He warned Deku not to feel pressured, recalling a troubling incident from grade school. Soy Sauce, curious, asked what had happened, but Bakugo dismissed it. When Aizawa announced that Midoriya would be the class representative and Yaoyorozu the deputy, Deku was visibly shaken. Yaoyorozu expressed her mixed feelings about the outcome, while others began to voice their support for Midoriya, recognizing his enthusiasm and Yaoyorozu's cool demeanor during their previous discussions. As the day continued, the bustling atmosphere of the school was palpable, with students and reporters alike filling the space. That was because everyone in the Hero course, Support course, and Management course met in the same place, Ida explained as Uraraka began to eat. The rice was delicious, she exclaimed, her face lighting up with joy. Despite being chosen as class representative, she felt uncertain about her qualifications. I shared my doubts with Ida and Uraraka, who reassured me that I was indeed capable. Uraraka emphasized that my courage and judgment at critical moments made me a worthy leader, which was why she had voted for me. I was taken aback by this revelation and asked Ida if he had wanted to be class rep as well, noting his glasses. Uraraka pointed out that he had spoken without thinking. Ida clarified that wanting to be class rep and being suitable for it were different matters. He had simply acted according to his judgment. When Ida used the word merely, Uraraka and I exchanged surprised glances, as it was not a term he typically used. Uraraka then asked Ida if he came from a wealthy family. For a brief moment, I thought I saw panic on his face. He admitted that his family had been heroes for generations and that he was the second son of the turbo hero, Ingenium, who was known for his leadership and adherence to rules. Ida aspired to be like his brother but felt it was still too soon for him to lead others. Unlike him, Midoriya had grasped the essence of the practical portion of the entrance exam, making him more suitable for the role. Ida smiled, and Uraraka noted that it was the first time she had seen him do so. Suddenly, the loud ringing of a bell interrupted our conversation. I reached out and tapped my hand, causing me to float. I quickly adjusted my pants to avoid damaging them and shouted, using my engines to propel myself in circles before slamming into the wall. I announced that everything was fine and that there was no need to panic, it was just the media. I encouraged everyone to act in a manner befitting the best, and I watched as the tension in the room eased, allowing conversations to resume. Time passed, and from Deku's perspective, Ida's antics of running on water only to trip and belly flop became a source of amusement. Yaoyorozu stood beside me, urging me to start the class officer selection. My hand twitched nervously in front of so many people as I began to speak. I suggested that Tenya Ida should be the class representative after all, noting how he had captured everyone's attention in a cool manner. Kirishima agreed, recalling how Ida had been a big help in the cafeteria. Kaminari added that Ida resembled the person on the emergency exit sign, which elicited a groan from me. Aizawa suddenly interrupted, urging us to hurry up. Ida, acknowledging the nomination, stood up and promised to do his best as class representative. Kirishima cheered him on, calling him emergency exit, while Yaoyorozu expressed her disappointment at being overlooked. In another scene, Nizu pondered how the ordinary members of the press could have caused such chaos. He questioned whether someone evil had infiltrated or if it was a deliberate declaration of war, as he surveyed the completely destroyed gate alongside Midnight, 13, and Recovery Girl. Azui, our local cinnamon roll, announced that today's basic hero training would involve 3 instructors, All Might, herself, and 1 more person. Siro eagerly asked what we would be doing, and Aizawa revealed that it would be rescue training, covering disasters and shipwrecks. The class sighed, realizing it would be a lot of work. Kirishima, Mina, Kaminari, and I expressed our readiness for the challenge, while Aizawa informed us that we could choose whether to wear our costumes, as some might limit our abilities. The training would take place off-campus, and we were instructed to prepare for the bus ride. On our way to the changing room, I walked beside Deku and whispered about the press incident. He expressed his concern that it might not have been just the press, hinting at a more sinister presence. I agreed, noting that as long as it wasn't her, we would be fine. Just then, Bakugo called for us to hurry up, and Deku responded as we moved forward. As we boarded the bus, Ida called for Class 1A to gather and form 2 lines by student numbers for a smooth boarding process. Once on the bus, I realized it was not what I had expected, feeling a bit disappointed. Mina, sitting next to me, echoed my sentiments. Deku listened as Azui commented on how she generally said what was on her mind. When he asked her name, she told him to call her Tsuyu and remarked that his quirk was unusual, leaving him wide-eyed in surprise. Kirishima interjected, noting how Midoriya transformed into green smoke, creating lightning and fire, showcasing incredible strength and speed, along with rapid healing. He admired Midoriya's quirk, expressing that it was far more impressive than his own hardening ability, which, while effective in combat, lacked excitement. Midoriya agreed, encouraging Kirishima that his quirk was more than sufficient for a professional hero. Aoyama and Ishido chimed in, emphasizing the importance of popularity for heroes. Aoyama proudly declared that his naval laser was both powerful and stylish, perfect for a pro, though Ishido pointed out its drawbacks, causing Aoyama's enthusiasm to wane. Kirishima then pointed out the strengths of Todoroki, Bakugo, and Midoriya, catching Bakugo's attention. Azui remarked on Bakugo's unpredictable nature, suggesting it would hinder his popularity. Bakugo snapped back, defending himself, while Kaminari humorously noted how quickly everyone recognized Bakugo's abrasive personality. The atmosphere was lively, filled with banter, until Aizawa instructed everyone to be alert as they arrived at their destination. As the bus came to a stop, Aizawa urged the class to focus. A man in a space suit and bright yellow shoes greeted them, causing the class to gasp in excitement. It was 13, the space hero known for rescuing many from disasters. Midoriya felt a rush of joy at seeing 13 again. 13 welcomed them and led the class into a facility designed for disaster simulations, explaining its various zones for different types of emergencies. He proudly introduced the facility as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. Aizawa inquired about All Might's absence, to which 13 explained that All Might had overexerted himself and was resting. 13 then shared details about his quirk, Black Hole, which could absorb anything and turn it to dust. Midoriya recalled how 13 had used this power to save people in the past. 13 cautioned the class about the potential dangers of their quirks, reminding them that while they had great power, they were meant to use it to protect others, not to cause harm. The class erupted in applause, praising 13's inspiring words. However, their excitement was abruptly interrupted when the lights flickered and a purple mist began to swirl ominously. A figure emerged from the mist, partially obscured but revealing a crimson eye and pale blue hair. Aizawa quickly commanded the students to gather and stay still, instructing 13 to protect them as he prepared to confront the threat. Kirishima, confused, asked if this was part of their training, but Aizawa warned him to remain still, identifying the intruders as villains. As panic spread among the students, they realized they were facing a real threat during what was supposed to be a practice for saving lives. Shigaraki, observing the scene, noted that only 13 and Aizawa were present, expressing disappointment that All Might was not there. Kurojairi, appearing beside him, confirmed their plan to confront All Might. Shigaraki, frustrated, considered that perhaps drawing out All Might by threatening the students would be a way to achieve their goal. Midoriya understood the gravity of the situation, recognizing the true nature of the challenges pro-heroes faced to protect them. The villains were not after him but were intent on confronting All Might. Kirishima questioned how so many villains could infiltrate such a secure facility, while Yaoyorozu asked 13 why the alarms had not sounded. 13 admitted he was unsure, leaving the class on edge as they braced for what was to come. If the alarm sensors aren't being triggered, then one of these villains must have a quirk that masks their presence here. They carefully chose this isolated facility as an entry point at a time when a class was being taught. They are foolish for trespassing here, but they must have a concrete objective in mind. What could it be? Aizawa observed the hand man closely, contemplating the situation. He instructed 13 to evacuate everyone and alert the main campus, noting that if the villains could block their sensors, they might also be jamming regular communication. Kaminari responded with a simple acknowledgement before I interrupted, expressing concern about Aizawa's ability to confront so many villains alone. Aizawa cut me off, stating that one cannot be a hero with just one trick and left it to 13. With that, he jumped down into the mass of villains. As he descended, we overheard some villains discussing their plans, expressing surprise at Aizawa's solo approach. Suddenly, Aizawa's hair began to float, and his eyes turned a chilling red. The villains attempted to use their quirks, only to find their abilities failing. Aizawa swiftly wrapped his scarf around them, incapacitating several with ease. One villain, a four-armed brute, charged at Aizawa, but he countered with a powerful punch, sending the villain crashing down. Ida urged us to take shelter as we ran toward the doors, only to be confronted by a villain shrouded in purple mist. He introduced himself as a member of the League of Villains, declaring their intent to confront All Might. 13 attempted to use his black hole quirk on the Mist Man, but Kaken and Kirishima leaped in to challenge him. The Mist Man acknowledged their strength, but 13 warned them to stay back, emphasizing the danger they faced. Determined to hold the mist at bay, I transformed into plasma, unleashing bursts of energy to push back the encroaching mist. Ida asked about our classmates' locations, and Shoji confirmed they were scattered throughout the facility. I urged everyone to formulate a plan quickly, as I could only maintain my plasma form for a limited time. 13 entrusted Ida with the responsibility of alerting the school about the situation, emphasizing the importance of his role. Sato encouraged Ida to escape through the emergency exit, reminding him that the villains were likely only causing trouble inside the facility. With a burst of determination, Ida dashed past the Mist Man, narrowly avoiding his grasp. The Mist Man attempted to open a portal, but Shoji intervened, allowing Ida to escape while keeping the Mist Man occupied. Meanwhile, Bakugo and his classmates were dealing with their own challenges. After defeating a villain, Bakugo expressed concern for their classmates, noting that they needed to help everyone. He was determined to confront the Warp Gate villain, believing that taking him down would hinder the villain's movements. Despite Kirishima's warnings about the dangers of direct confrontation, Bakugo remained resolute, ready to face whatever threats lay ahead. "You've convinced me." All Might burst into the USJ, declaring his presence as the students cheered for him. Todoroki froze the ground and the Nomu as Kirishima attempted to strike the hand villain. He proclaimed that scum like them could never kill the symbol of peace. Kaken urged All Might to respond, and with a grin he transformed into plasma, questioning who would prevail, villains or heroes. Kaken observed as All Might seized the opportunity to leap away from the bird-like creature. The hand villain acknowledged the predicament, revealing that their escape route was compromised. Kaken confronted the villain, pointing out his limitations and asserting that if his body was entirely mist, he wouldn't be able to express relief after a close call. He warned the villain not to make any sudden moves, threatening to obliterate him if he did. Kirishima remarked on Kaken's intensity, noting that they had surpassed their limits and were at full health. The villain ordered the Nomu to eliminate Kaken, who was deemed a threat to their escape. The Nomu stood up, its frozen body crumbling, yet it continued to advance. All Might instinctively shielded everyone, expressing surprise at the Nomu's regeneration abilities. The hand villain explained that the Nomu was designed to endure any attack. As the Nomu charged at Kaken, All Might intervened, taking the hit. Kaken was frustrated by the misunderstanding of his abilities. The hand villain taunted All Might, claiming that both heroes and villains thrived on violence, reducing them to mere tools in a cycle of conflict. All Might countered, asserting that idealistic criminals had a different fire in their eyes, while the villain was simply enjoying the chaos. The battle intensified, with Kaken and the others rallying behind All Might. They refused to retreat, determined to support him. Kaken spread plasma around the battlefield to prevent the villains from escaping. All Might encouraged them to watch as he prepared to get serious. The hand villain commanded the Nomu and Kurojari to take care of the kids while he confronted All Might. All Might declared that he would go beyond his limits, ready to smash through any obstacle. With a powerful punch, he sent the Nomu crashing through the roof, demonstrating his incredible strength. Kaken marveled at the display, acknowledging that All Might had surpassed the Nomu's regenerative abilities with sheer force. The hand villain, frustrated by the outcome, accused All Might of cheating and lamented the loss of the Nomu. He scratched at his neck in agitation, realizing they were outmatched. All Might emerged from the dust, ready to finish the fight. The hand villain, desperate, challenged All Might to come at him. Kaken and the others were hesitant, but the hand villain's frustration grew. He urged his ally, Tamura Shigaraki, to calm down, recognizing that the Nomu had dealt significant damage. They contemplated a double-team strategy, hoping to turn the tide in their favor. Meanwhile, Kaken and Todoroki decided to assist All Might. Midoriya, filled with determination, transformed into a ball of green plasma and launched himself at the hand villain. Kaken shouted for him to stay away from All Might, but the hand villain reached out, only to be intercepted. All Might announced the arrival of the school staff, who had come to support them. The principal apologized for their late arrival, assuring everyone they had brought as many reinforcements as possible. Uraraka called out to Ida, the president of Class 1A, who responded with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Snipe, feeling the tension of the moment, expressed his frustration as he fired his weapon, aiming at Handy. Kurogyri began to vanish into the mist, and 13, using their quirk, attempted to contain the situation. Handy, as he disappeared, threatened All Might, declaring that their next encounter would not end well. Cementos observed the aftermath, bewildered by the sudden retreat of their adversaries. Midnight shared her disbelief, while the principal focused on ensuring the safety of the students. He instructed them to head to the main gate as he prepared to assist the wounded. All Might, grateful for Cementos's help, acknowledged the close call and expressed his admiration, urging him to take care of himself. Later, Nisa discussed the need to enhance security measures in light of the recent events. A police officer approached Detective Tsukachi with news of a captured villain nearby, who appeared unharmed and unresponsive. Tsukachi requested permission to investigate the school further, and Nizu readily agreed, emphasizing the importance of the police's role. The officer also mentioned a mysterious note found at the scene, which raised questions about its meaning. The following day, classes were canceled, but the students remained on edge. Ida called everyone to their seats for homeroom, only to find himself the only one standing. Aizawa entered the classroom, and the students greeted him with excitement. He acknowledged their enthusiasm but reminded them that their challenges were far from over. Aizawa informed the class about the upcoming UA Sports Festival, emphasizing its significance despite the recent villain attack. The students expressed their concerns, but Aizawa reassured them that the festival was an essential opportunity to showcase their skills. He explained the importance of the event in the context of Japan's hero culture, highlighting that it was a chance for them to impress pro-heroes and secure potential sidekick positions after graduation. The class buzzed with excitement and apprehension as they considered the implications of the festival. Aizawa encouraged them to seize the moment, reminding them that this event was a crucial stepping stone in their journey to becoming heroes. The principal wanted to ask about a note that was found. Normally, they wouldn't inquire, but it seemed significant. The note read, "Nice school, little Mitama, Koba eft." The speaker looked around the class for any reactions. Most students reacted as expected, but Midoriya and Bakugo caught their attention with a sudden look of fear that they quickly concealed while exchanging glances. It was clear they knew something. Midoriya felt the weight of the note's message. As he turned to Bakugo, their teacher, Aizawa, requested their presence after class. Midoriya froze, feeling the intensity of Aizawa's gaze. He agreed, while Bakugo reluctantly complied after some grumbling. Midoriya thought to himself that Aizawa might know more than he let on. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and they made their way to the conference room. All Might, along with his colleagues, was deep in discussion. Detective Tsukachi explained that Shigaraki's quirk allowed him to disintegrate anything he touched. They had searched the quirk registry for men in their 20s and 30s but found nothing on Shigaraki or Kurogyri, who were both using aliases. The note remained a mystery, as no one at the school had the names Mitama or Koba, nor was there a villain with the alias FT. Snipe expressed concern that they needed to learn quickly, as Shigaraki would heal and return. All Might pondered the unusual nature of the attack, noting Shigaraki's reckless behavior and childish demeanor. Nizu pointed out that revealing one's quirk in battle was foolish, suggesting that Shigaraki's arrogance could lead to his downfall. They discussed the apprehension of 72 villains at the USJ, questioning why so many would follow someone like Shigaraki, who embodied pure, unaffected evil. Detective Tsukachi emphasized the need to focus on their investigation and find the writer of the note. Nizu reflected on Shigaraki's potential for growth if he had a proper mentor. Aizawa entered the room with Midoriya and Bakugo, prompting All Might to shift back to his heroic form. Aizawa's serious demeanor indicated the urgency of the situation. He confronted the two students, suggesting they knew something about the note. Bakugo, in his typical fashion, resisted, but Nizu urged them to share what they knew. Midoriya hesitated, offering a playful yet unsettling smile, indicating that the information was not for everyone. Bakugo stepped protectively in front of Midoriya, insisting that only they and the government Secret Six knew the details. Midoriya mentioned that there were 4 heroes aware of the situation, including Edge Shot, Mandalay, and Best Jeanist. Bakugo, frustrated, declared they were leaving and dragged Midoriya out, slamming the door behind them. Midoriya, with a smirk, hinted that the timing was right for something significant. Detective Tsukachi noted that if this was indeed a government Secret Six matter, they couldn't simply ask one of the heroes involved. The GSS was known for their secrecy, making it difficult to establish contact. "I can help, I'm already involved in 2 of the 4 cases they are working on," the speaker stated as they retrieved their phone from their pocket and began dialing. The phone rang several times before a voice on the other end inquired about the code. The speaker whispered the answer: plasma, solid, liquid, and gas. The voice then asked for their identity, to which the speaker replied, "It's me, All Might." The voice confirmed their identity and said they would connect them to the Six. The line went silent, and the speaker placed the phone on the desk, face up. A projection appeared, revealing a man dressed in a black suit, a matching tie, a dark purple shirt, and a white mask adorned with a spider web pattern. "All Might, why have you contacted us?" the man asked from the screen. "We need information on one of your cases involving Mitama, Koba, and FT, All Might explained. The man responded, "Oh, the Phantom case. May I ask why and who is with you right now?" All Might continued, "We found a note after the UA attack that read, 'Nice school, Mitama, Koba, FT. The heroes present include Snipe, Midnight, Eraserhead, Vlad King, and Nizu, along with Detective Tsukachi.'" The man on the screen replied, "Good, give us 1 minute to conduct background checks, and then we will inform you." Vlad interjected, "Really? We don't have forever." All Might reassured him, "Give them a minute. When they say a minute, they mean it." Vlad shouted, "How can you do a background check for all of us in 1 minute?" All Might crossed his arms and replied, "No need to yell, Vlad, but believe me, they can." The man on the screen added, "Get rid of Vlad, and we will tell you. His record isn't the best, and Snipe, Midnight, your lucky yours are almost as bad. Everyone but Vlad has been cleared." With that, they had to incapacitate Vlad to get him to leave, turning off all power except for the lights and sensors in the room. "Now, what do you want to know?" the man asked. Nizu pondered, "Who are Mitama, Koba, and F.T?" He had a suspicion about Mitama and Koba's identities. The man on the screen clarified, "Mitama is one of the 4 reasons the GSS even exists. He is a student of yours, Izuku Midoriya, but we call him Mitama. He is the one in danger and the most powerful of a group known as the Matter States." Midnight inquired, "What are the Matter States?" The man continued, "The Matter States are a group of 4 individuals who, for some reason, were granted the powers of the states of matter. Have you ever heard of the Satyendra legend? I'm guessing you haven't. The legend states that, in this world, most only think about the elements: water, air, fire, and earth. But what about the states, the only reason elements exist? The world will have to learn that the future is in their hands. If solid, liquid, gas, and plasma join together in peace, then the Bose-Einstein stone will not be created. But if they fall into the hands of evil, They shall rise with the power to control every atom in the world. All the states of matter and elements will be at their mercy. All that is needed is for them to freeze together. Listen to this warning. If not, the end will come sooner rather than later. That is what the legend says, and with the 4 states of matter actually being real, I suggest we heed the warning. So, basically, there are 4 people who are essentially a superweapon. Our job is to keep them safe, and this FT is trying to capture them to rule the world. Aizawa asked. The man confirmed, yes, you are correct. All Might works on the solid and liquid cases, but the gas case is where FT comes into play. FT is what we call the legend hunter. Her goal is to capture the matter states and force them to combine and freeze until they become a Bose-Einstein condensate stone, which would allow her to control every atom in this world. Right now, she has gas, the second most powerful of the 4. Our job is to stop FT from acquiring all 4 and to keep them far away from each other. All Might then stood and approached the phone on the desk. So, is Katsuki Bakugo Koba? Yes, Koba is Katsuki Bakugo. He is Mitama's bodyguard and is fully trained for it. He reports everything to us. We anticipated your call since Koba's report indicated that Mitama received a text from FT 3 days ago, and with the attack that occurred yesterday, we had all the information ready for you. So, what you're saying is that Bakugo is a fully trained bodyguard, Midoriya is one of the 4 states of matter, and he is being hunted to be turned into a super weapon? Midnight asked, scratching her head. The man confirmed, yes, you are correct. May I ask what you know about FT? Nizu inquired, placing his hands behind him. The man replied, we know her quirk is Suijin Uno, or mercury feather. She has the ability to create a gas form of mercury in the shape of a feather and manipulate it to fly at her target. Once it hits, it bursts into a liquid that wraps around the target before solidifying. She loves owls and dresses like one. She even has a pet owl. However, we haven't seen her ourselves, only what reports say. It's not much use for you since she hasn't been seen in years, and I doubt we will see her again. Thank you for that. Is there anything else we need to know? Nizu asked. The man responded, you can call me 3. The only other thing you probably need to know is that FT has one of the 4, a young girl, age 12, who was taken from her home at the age of 6. She is the gas matter. We know it was FT because she left a note and an owl feather. If FT captures them all and turns them, we can steal the stone to change them back. As for the other 2, I'm going to keep that a secret just in case. We only discussed their locations at the main base to keep them safe, but now Mitama's location has been compromised. Yue. His house was known as one of the safest places in the area, so Aizawa requested that everyone keep it secure. He approached the phone and expressed his determination, recalling how he nearly lost his life protecting them from the League of Villains. He was ready to do it again, confident that everyone present would feel the same. He then glanced around, asking if the parents were aware of the situation. The response was that they were not. The secret was being kept from them. They only knew that Koba had special classes after school, which they assumed were related to his quirk. In reality, those classes were for his role as a bodyguard. It was also mentioned that Mitama was unaware of this arrangement, as he had struggled to make friends after the first incident and only trusted Koba. If he found out the truth, it could jeopardize that trust. After Aizawa finished speaking, everyone remained silent, deep in thought. One of them expressed gratitude to Mr. 3 and requested to be contacted if anything new arose. Mr. 3 assured them he would provide the number and code for emergencies before the screen went dark. The atmosphere shifted as they realized the weight of the situation they were facing. They discussed the upcoming sports festival and the challenges posed by Bakugo, who had shown his superiority in battles, particularly against Midoriya. It was clear that both of them were exceptional fighters, having trained together since childhood. With the knowledge that Bakugo was a bodyguard, they acknowledged the need for caution. However, they also recognized that some students, like Todoroki, could pose a challenge. Ultimately, they decided to allow them to participate in the festival, noting that this year's event had significantly increased security. Tsukachi, reflecting on the implications of 4 individuals who could become a formidable weapon if captured, expressed disbelief at the situation. He excused himself to assist in tracking down villains, leaving the room. Meanwhile, Bakugo felt compelled to ensure Midoriya's safety and decided to take him away from the area. As they walked through the halls, Midoriya inquired about their destination. Bakugo was merely venting some frustration until lunch ended, but he also realized Midoriya hadn't eaten. He shouted out an invitation for lunch, and Midoriya happily accepted, eager to see everyone. Bakugo couldn't help but tease him about his newfound friendships, which included Ida, Uraraka, and Kirishima. Midoriya expressed curiosity about Todoroki, who remained quiet. As they approached the lunchroom, Bakugo received a text from Mr. 3, confirming that several teachers were aware of the situation. Midoriya noticed Bakugo's distraction and asked who he was texting. Bakugo replied that it was about the ongoing matters and promised to share more later. Midoriya insisted they go eat, dragging Bakugo along. Bakugo whispered a playful remark about Midoriya's changing attitude, which Midoriya acknowledged, asserting that he was improving at trusting others and enjoying his friendships. As they entered the lunchroom, they were greeted by their classmates, who called them over to join. After school, as class ended, Uraraka opened the door and was taken aback by the scene outside. Mineta questioned what was happening, and Bakugo, slinging his bag over his shoulder, explained that they were being observed by students from the general studies track, curious about the kids who had survived a villain attack. He noted that it made sense for them to want a glimpse before the sports festival. Ida, frustrated by Bakugo's dismissive attitude, urged him to refrain from calling people he didn't know extras. A student from the back pushed forward, expressing disappointment in what he perceived as arrogance from the hero course students. He explained that those who didn't make the hero course were hoping to transfer based on their performance in the upcoming festival, while the reverse could also happen for the current students. The tension in the air hinted at the competitive spirit that would soon unfold. The kid with bright purple hair, dark eye bags, and a laid-back attitude declared a challenge. He introduced himself as a student from Class 1B, expressing his curiosity about a recent encounter with villains. However, he was frustrated by what he perceived as arrogance from the hero course students. He warned that they better not embarrass themselves at the upcoming event. Without hesitation, Bakugo grabbed Midoriya by the wrist and began pushing through the crowd of students. Midoriya protested, upset about the growing number of detractors they had attracted. Kirishima shouted at Bakugo, urging him to reconsider his actions, insisting that he was only making enemies. Bakugo, undeterred, declared his intent to rise to the top with Midoriya at his side, dismissing the concerns of his classmates. Kirishima, with tears of admiration, lamented Bakugo's straightforwardness, while Kaminari echoed his worries about the consequences of their actions. Time passed, and the scene shifted to Midoriya's house. Bakugo, eager to make the most of their 2-week break from school, asked Inko for suggestions on how to prepare for the upcoming sports festival. Inko mentioned a competition at the park where participants would showcase their quirks in a televised event called Flash or Trash. The top 5 performers would advance to the next round, and she believed they had a good chance of making it. Inko explained the application process, which involved selecting a charity for the prize money, as well as providing their names, quirks, and ages. Midoriya, excited, nodded in agreement, even with his mouth full of food. Bakugo acknowledged the challenge ahead, realizing they needed to create a captivating performance without frightening the audience, as their previous acts had been aimed at scaring villains. Midoriya encouraged Bakugo, suggesting that a successful show could boost their popularity as heroes. Bakugo agreed but noted the limited time they had to choose songs, plan their performance, and decide on costumes. Inko expressed her confidence in them, stating that even if they didn't succeed, they would gain valuable experience. Bakugo then asked if they could choose the hospital where Inko worked as their charity. She responded that they might need to support a specific initiative, like a wish-granting program. Midoriya was on board with that idea, and they began filling out the application form. Inko asked who wanted to go first, and Bakugo confidently volunteered. As they completed the forms, Bakugo chose to support the wish-granting program, while Midoriya decided to help the quirkless shelters. Bakugo teased Midoriya about his choice, and they turned on the news, which was still covering the recent villain attack. Midoriya noted that it was a significant event, but he reassured Bakugo that soon the focus would shift to the sports festival. They both felt relieved to have something to distract them from the troubling news. Bakugo playfully challenged Midoriya to come up with strategies for their performance, but Midoriya insisted he wouldn't help since he was just as determined to win. Their playful banter escalated into a chase around the house, but their fun was abruptly interrupted by Inko, who reminded them of the house rules against running indoors. They sheepishly acknowledged their mistake and retreated to their rooms, reflecting on their actions. Inko's voice echoed from downstairs, expressing her disapproval of Katsuki's comment about her. Katsuki quickly dismissed it, insisting it was nothing. A short while later, Deku and Katsuki arrived at the park, just 10 minutes before their performances were scheduled to begin. They were both dressed for the show and had their songs ready on USB drives. Deku, filled with excitement, expressed his eagerness to showcase their quirks on television. Katsuki, however, was more focused on defeating the competition, wearing a mischievous grin. Despite Deku's insistence that they were there to demonstrate their abilities, Katsuki's competitive spirit shone through as he was dragged to the sign-in booth. At the booth, a woman with long light green hair and bright purple eyes greeted them. She wore a black and white dress with a purple stripe. She introduced herself as Anju and asked if they were there to participate in the show. Deku enthusiastically confirmed their participation, while Katsuki introduced himself with a hint of annoyance. Anju informed them of their performance times and handed them contracts to sign, stating that they weren't responsible for any injuries. Katsuki, uninterested in the details, signed the papers hastily and shoved Deku's papers into his chest, urging him to hurry. As they made their way to the field to find a spot to watch the performances, Deku asked if Katsuki was excited. Katsuki's response was loud and confident, declaring his intent to obliterate the competition. They settled under a large oak tree, where Deku pointed out the view. Katsuki teased him about his direction, but Deku playfully insisted he was fine as he flew up to a branch. Katsuki climbed up beside him, explaining that he had to use his quirk to avoid causing any unintended explosions. They took in the scene around them, the bright green grass, the clear blue fountain, and the stage set up for the show. As more people arrived, Deku expressed his hopes of making it into the top 5. Katsuki reassured him of their skills, warning him to be careful not to fall. With only a few minutes until the show began, Deku prepared to unleash his quirk, changing the plasma in his hands to purple. Katsuki reminded him to wait for his turn. The host, Anju, welcomed everyone to the event, announcing the first contestant, Ash Button, whose quirk was called Splatter. Ash showcased his abilities with impressive flips and colorful explosions, earning a score of 68 points. Next up was Ashido Mina, who dazzled the audience with her flexibility and creativity. She performed acrobatic feats, creating a heart shape with her acid and even making it rain colorful confetti as she landed gracefully. As the performances continued, Katsuki and Deku watched intently, their competitive spirits ignited as they anticipated their turns on stage. Mina Ashido had just finished her performance, and the announcer revealed her score, 73 points, placing her in first. Deku watched with excitement, noting how flexible Ashido was. He raised his fist in the air, feeling inspired. He was determined to do even better. As another contestant walked on stage, he confidently declared that he would crush the competition when it was his turn. Kaminari, Ashido, and Kirishima turned their attention to the stage as the announcer, Anju, introduced the explosive Katsuki Bakugo and his quirk, Explosions. They were surprised to see Bakugo putting on an impressive show. Ashido commented on how unexpected it was to see Bakugo dancing so well, while Kirishima noted that he almost looked peaceful and happy. Deku, who had been quietly observing, suddenly revealed that he had been there the whole time. He congratulated Ashido on her current standing and expressed confidence that he and Bakugo would soon take the top spots. When Deku mentioned that he would be performing too, everyone was taken aback. He explained that he and Bakugo wanted to think outside the box with their quirks. Kaminari and Kirishima admitted they wouldn't be performing, feeling their quirks weren't flashy enough to showcase. As Bakugo finished his performance, Anju announced his score, 72 points, the best of the night, putting him in first place. Bakugo approached Deku with a smug look, challenging him to beat his score. Deku assured him he would, standing confidently beside Bakugo. Kirishima playfully complimented Deku's manliness, which prompted Bakugo to glare at him. Next, it was Deku's turn. Anju announced him and his quirk, Phantom Life. As the music began, a thick green mist enveloped the stage. Suddenly, a small tornado formed, and bright green mist eyes appeared, transforming into Deku in a fancy suit. The audience gasped, and Bakugo shouted for everyone to just enjoy the show. Deku raised his arms, and two more mist figures appeared beside him. The crowd was amazed as the mist figures began to dance, and Deku stepped to the edge of the stage, creating a mist top hat that he placed on his head. He floated in the air, colorful bursts of light erupting beneath him as he descended gracefully. The audience was captivated as he landed on one foot, disappearing into the mist before reappearing in a checkered shirt and tight jeans, extending his hand as if inviting someone to join him. He left the stage with a memorable line about stars needing darkness to shine. Anju excitedly announced that Deku had scored 87 points, the second highest score of the season. Deku nudged Bakugo, reminding him of his earlier claim, which prompted Bakugo to chase him around the grounds in playful frustration. After a brief intermission, Anju announced the top 5 contestants moving on to the next round: Izuku Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugo, Taper Suko, Lert Zilt, and Mina Ishido. They were all called to the stage, and Anju encouraged them to prepare for the next challenge, hinting at the uncertainty of their futures in the competition. As the 5 gathered, Anju handed them a sheet detailing the time and place of their next show, along with the news that travel expenses would be covered. Ishido was ecstatic, unsure of whom to bring along, and hugged her friends tightly, earning a playful glare from Bakugo. Deku reassured everyone that Bakugo wouldn't harm Ishido, as it wouldn't be professional. He then took Bakugo's hand, leading him toward the exit, while the others waved goodbye, excited for what was to come. "We need to get home," Midoriya called out urgently. The response was a quick farewell as he turned to assist Kiri in carrying Ishido. Izuku found himself enveloped in darkness, a chill creeping down his spine. He questioned the coldness that surrounded him as he shuffled cautiously down the path. The distant clang of metal echoed ominously, a sound that made his stomach churn as the sharp scent of iron filled the air. Confusion washed over him as he wondered why he was in such a place and what he had done to deserve it. Suddenly, he spotted a dark gray owl with piercing yellow eyes that seemed to wish for his demise. In a panic, he shouted for Kaken, hoping for help as he sprinted toward the source of the metallic sounds, desperate to drown out the owl's screech. The cold breeze from the owl's wings brushed against his neck, heightening his fear. He called out again, pleading for assistance, but his cries were met with a sudden, painful attack as the owl's talons struck deep into his back, forcing him to the ground. A cry of anguish escaped him as he felt the creature shake him violently, its claws leaving shallow marks across his skin. In his desperation, Izuku struggled against the bird, praying that someone would hear his calls for help. His body trembled as the screeching transformed into cries for his name. Tears streamed down his face, a mix of pain and relief as he heard familiar voices. With all his strength he reached out, shouting for help. He jolted awake, surrounded by his concerned classmates and teacher. Pain radiated from his back, and as he pressed a hand to his shoulder, he felt the warm liquid that stained his palm. Looking at Kaken, he managed to utter, "Howl," before collapsing from blood loss. Kaken observed the scene unfold in class as they prepared for the upcoming sports festival. About 20 minutes into hero class, chaos erupted when Deku suddenly collapsed. Initially silent, he soon began to twitch, prompting everyone to rush to his side. Kaken noted how pale Deku looked, his body colder than usual. Round Face cautiously approached, crouching beside him and holding his hand. Kaken whispered about a nightmare, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Earphone Jack reacted loudly, questioning the severity of the situation, drawing the attention of the rest of the class. As Deku began to scream and plead for help, Kaken instinctively knelt beside him, shaking him and calling his name in hopes of waking him. Soon, the entire class joined in, their voices echoing in the training ground as Recovery Girl and Aizawa arrived. After some time, Aizawa pulled Kaken aside for a private conversation. They walked to the nurse's office where Deku lay. Aizawa closed the door behind them and explained that Deku was stable but would bear a scar from the claw marks on his back. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and fixed Kaken with a serious gaze. Kaken hesitated, feeling defensive. Aizawa urged him to share what had happened to help prevent future incidents. Kaken reluctantly admitted that it involved F.T and her owl, knowing the truth was crucial for Deku's recovery. The peculiar quirk had the ability to trap anyone who looked into its eye in a nightmare, especially when any damage was inflicted on their real body. His energy was drastically low, and he felt too cold for his own good. There was a reason his body temperature was naturally warmer than others. He grunted as he grabbed a spare blanket from an unused bed and added it to Deku's. He decided to head back to class, knowing his classmates were eager to know how Deku was doing. With a determined stomp, he left the room and made his way to class. FT observed the situation with a grin, pleased that things were going easier than expected. She looked at the vial of blood she had collected from Yoru's talons and felt a rush of excitement. Soon, the remaining pieces would fall into her hands, and she would rule the world. She laughed as she placed the blood in a cooler. Her second-in-command, Hinto, approached with a bow and informed her that the new element collected last week had started to act up again. She instructed him to handle it but warned him not to destroy it, as they still needed it. She glanced at the cameras monitoring the cages, confident that their plans were nearing fruition. Izuku blinked his eyes open to find himself staring at a plain white ceiling, a strange sight since he rarely slept. What was even more unusual was the pain in his back and the presence of a kind old lady by his bedside. She gently advised him not to move, explaining that his shoulder and back were still tender because he had not had enough energy to fully heal himself. Curious about what had happened, he croaked out a question. The lady informed him that Bakugo had said he was attacked in his nightmares by an owl. As she retrieved a cold bottle of water from a mini fridge, he took a sip and offered her a grateful smile before confirming Bakugo's account. He recounted how he had been fighting Ishido, only to be drawn into a dark place by the sight of bright yellow eyes. He described the overwhelming sensations of clanging metal and a strong iron smell before encountering a dark gray owl with those haunting yellow eyes. He had tried to escape, but it had attacked him, leaving him helpless until he was awakened by the cries of his classmates. The memory of those terrifying eyes lingered in his mind, and he shivered at the thought of seeing them again. Bakugo sat with a scowl, waiting for their class to be called when Todoroki summoned him and Deku. He declared that he was stronger and more capable than them. Bakugo erupted in anger, challenging Todoroki and accusing him of keeping secrets from their class while drawing the government's attention. As they moved outside for a more private conversation, Deku pressed Todoroki for information about their involvement with the government and why he had chosen to challenge them. Todoroki revealed that a note had been intended for them, and he suspected they were aware of a school attack from 4 years ago that the government had tried to cover up. Just then, a man emerged from the shadows, introducing himself as Edgeshot. He explained that he was there to keep an eye on them under orders and revealed that Deku was being targeted by someone named FT. He instructed Koba to take Mitama and Todoroki back to class while he figured out their next steps. As they returned to the classroom, Bakugo couldn't help but feel that something significant was happening, especially with Edgeshot's involvement and their use of code names. The tension hung in the air as they walked in silence, and Bakugo kicked the door open, announcing their return with a loud declaration. Time passed, and the atmosphere shifted as everyone confronted Ishido, Deku, and Bakugo about their performances and their advancement to the next round of the Flash or Trash competition. The UA Sports Festival had arrived, the one time each year when aspiring heroes competed in a grand battle. Present Mike announced the first years of the hero course, Class 1A, and the excitement in the air was palpable as they prepared for the challenges ahead. Izuku Midoriya, the student representative from Class 1A, stepped up to the microphone on stage. He acknowledged the hard work everyone had put in to reach this point and expressed his gratitude. Today, however, they would need to give their all, as everyone was aiming for the top spot, himself included. With a bow, he concluded his speech, encouraging everyone to go beyond their limits. Without further delay, the first event was announced, the qualifiers. Midnight, the announcer, pointed to a sign that read, "Obstacle Course Race." The course spanned a 4-kilometer lap around the stadium. As the racers took their positions, Midnight shouted, "Start!" Izuku noticed the narrow gate and decided to transform into plasma, floating above the crowd toward the exit as ice began to cover the floor. He challenged Shoto Todoroki, taunting him as he flew over and landed directly in front of him, blocking his view. Katsuki Bakugo, determined not to let either of them win, propelled himself forward with explosions. Mineta attempted to make a statement about his skills, but was abruptly interrupted when a robot knocked him aside. Present Mike announced the first obstacle, Robo Inferno, the same 0 pointers from the entrance exam. Izuku waved goodbye as he charged through the robots, dispersing them with his plasma form. However, he noticed the robots becoming encased in ice, realizing Todoroki was trying to hinder him. Undeterred, he unleashed a burst of plasma, igniting the robots. As he returned to his normal form, he sprinted down the path toward the next obstacle, hearing Present Mike's booming voice announcing his lead. Izuku had completely destroyed the first obstacle, while Katsuki was close behind, using his explosions to gain speed. Shoto was also racing ahead, seemingly unfazed by the earlier explosion. Aizawa, the teacher, pointed out that Todoroki had created an ice dome to protect himself from the blast. Izuku spotted the next challenge, a massive pit with pillars connected by ropes. He questioned the safety of the course as he transformed his lower half into plasma, gliding across the ropes at incredible speed. Katsuki shouted at him to stop flying, but Izuku was determined to keep his lead. As more competitors reached the ropes, Izuku noticed a girl with pink hair using jet boots and a hook system to cross. He managed to reach the other side but felt his muscles tightening. He reverted to his normal form and continued running, aware that Katsuki and Todoroki were closing in. The final obstacle loomed ahead, a minefield. Izuku expressed his concern about safety just as Present Mike announced the challenge. He wondered how much the school would be fined for putting students in danger. With a determined look, he shot a plasma blast to detonate the mines, creating a safe path for himself. As he sprinted down the newly cleared route, he noticed Katsuki and Todoroki battling behind him, trying to catch up. Izuku greeted them, teasingly noting that they weren't in front, so he couldn't see them. Just then he reached the exit tunnel, which he covered in plasma before entering. The explosion trapped everyone else outside the stadium. Present Mike declared Izuku the winner of this round, noting that he had added a new obstacle. While waiting, he took a moment to rest, ensuring he was at full strength for the next round. After a brief delay, Katsuki broke through the rubble, and the other competitors rushed in. Katsuki confronted Izuku, demanding to know what had just happened. Izuku responded that it had been fun, which only frustrated Katsuki more. Izuku then approached Kaminari, asking for a zap to relieve his sore muscles. Despite Katsuki's protests about the potential danger, Izuku explained that his plasma body could handle it. Kaminari, unsure but willing to help, complied with a smile, giving Izuku the zap he requested. Feeling rejuvenated, Izuku left Kaminari behind in the crowd and positioned himself in front of the stage where Midnight was announcing the next round. Once everyone had returned, she revealed the names of the students moving on to the next event. Midnight instructed those not on the list to leave the field, and soon only 42 students remained. She then announced that the next round would be a cavalry battle. Students were divided into groups of 4, tasked with stealing bands from other teams. Each player would earn 1 band, with a point value corresponding to their placement in the race. For example, the player finishing in 42nd place would earn 5 points, while the 41st would receive 10 points. However, the first-place finisher would receive a staggering 10 million points. Midnight's voice echoed as she announced the last part, and everyone turned to her with intense expressions, prompting her to simply shrug in response. Time passed, and Todoroki sat at a table, his eyes obscured by shadows as he stared down Endeavor while playing a card game. In my group, which included Tokoyami, Uraraka, Mei, and myself, we waited for the round to commence. I asked if everyone knew the plan, to which Tokoyami confidently replied that he and his babies would handle it. A dark smirk crossed my face as I declared that the game was about to begin. I settled atop my team, ready for action. In a brief overview of what would have happened if I continued, the sports festival proceeded as usual, but Izuku managed to defeat Todoroki, advancing to the finals where he faced Bakugo. Izuku emerged victorious by removing all the air from the ring. They received their hero names. Izuku became Fourth Change, while Katsuki was dubbed Ground Zero. Following the festival, they embarked on internships, encountered Stain, and participated in races, with Izuku winning this time. During training camp, Bakugo joined, and the usual confrontation between All Might and All for One unfolded. It was revealed that Fukato-tsum, known as FT, possessed another element. They moved into the dorms, where room assignments were judged, leading to a confrontation between Bakugo and Izuku, only for them to be kidnapped by FT. Fukato's quirk, Suijin Uno, allowed her to summon liquid mercury feathers that hardened upon touch. She had a pet owl named Yoru, which meant night. Meanwhile, Izuku was infused with other elements to create a stone that would grant its wielder control over the world. Fukato placed the stone into a necklace, causing earthquakes to ripple across the globe. Heavy storms battered the area as Fukato stood atop a tower of dirt. Heroes attempted to subdue her but made little progress. The League of Villains allied with the heroes to confront FT, as she posed a mutual threat. Somehow, All for One convinced All Might to join the battle. The heroes and villains found themselves cornered, facing powerful grunts. Katsuki, Endeavor, Aizawa, Ida, Uraraka, Kirishima, and Todoroki engaged in a fierce battle against FT. Tragically, Endeavor fell in battle, showcasing his dedication as a parent. As the fight raged on, everyone urged Izuku to resist the stone's influence, recalling moments when he had helped them. The stone began to crack and burn, leading to further chaos. FT lost control of the stone's power, causing the ground to fracture and lava to seep through, reminiscent of a game where the floor was lava. After intense fighting, Bakugo, barely able to stand, made one last desperate attempt to reach Izuku. His fingers grazed the stone, expressing that Izuku couldn't leave him. In that moment, the stone erupted in light. Izuku transformed, adorned in green with purple and blue highlights, while gas manifested in yellow and gold with silver and white highlights. Liquid appeared as dark blue with gray and black highlights, and solid form emerged as black with green and orange highlights. 4 figures materialized, encased in armor made of light. Izuku reached out, taking Bakugo's hand and helping him to his feet. The others placed their hands on Bakugo's shoulders, smiling as they welcomed him to the family. Bakugo began to glow, his armor forming in orange with red and black highlights. They turned their attention back to FT, who staggered to her feet, claiming that she was meant to wield that power. With a crazed look in her eyes, she summoned as many feathers as possible and launched them at the group. However, the feathers evaporated as gas stepped forward, while solid encased her in dirt. Liquid manipulated the lava around them, stabbing into the earth as FT screamed in frustration. Bakugo approached, freezing the lava and causing the dirt to crumble, revealing chains wrapped around FT's body. Izuku joined Bakugo, transforming the lava into plasma that intertwined with the chains before electrifying them, pulling her down into the earth. Bakugo smirked, declaring that they had taken down one foe and were ready for the rest. 3 years later, the group of 5 had become the most powerful heroes, successfully defeating All for One and the League of Villains. Their hero names were known far and wide: Fourth Change, Third Burn, Second Turn, First Step, and Ground Zero, collectively referred to as the 5 elements.